People think
Batman was
that
what?
we're closer than we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. This is January 8th, 2021, and this is my stream for today. I'm talking with my friend. I'm just going to go ahead and say call him a good friend, Nathan Thomas Milliner, artist extraordinaire. How you doing, Nate?
I'm doing great. It's Friday.
It is Friday, yes. And I'm going to, like I said, I got to turn these comments on here in a second. I kept saying comics for some reason, but it's probably because I love comics. What's going on here? Helena just messaged me. We just got finished with her studies for the day, and she's already missed. She must miss me already. All right. So what's been going on, man? How's the new year treating you so far, personally?
Oh, just realized I got a cut on my finger. So far, so good.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. I was like, what's going on? Oh, it's cut. Okay. No, so far so good. Been doing some artwork. Opened up commissions, and luckily a lot of them came in. So working on a bunch of stuff. We're about to return to filming tomorrow on Dark and
Nice.
Bloody Ground. Yeah, so I've been working on building props for that the last 2 days and getting everything together and storyboarding, and been working on this X-Wing repaint thing. And
I'm loving that.
Yeah, I've just kind of stained most. It's almost done. I just got to take care of those windows, but this is like a cheap. I got it for $40.
That's looking good. I'm glad you brought that because I wanted to show you. This is the color, a good look at the color of my TIE Fighter that I was telling you about. Doesn't it look bluish?
It is blue. Yeah, I got the regular TIE Fighter because is that the one from like Power of the Force in the 90s? Is that what that is, or is that a later one?
That's from 04. It's from the vintage collection. It may be just a repaint.
Yeah. I think the TIE Fighter I have is the same color as that.
Yeah, it's weird to me. I don't know. Like, because all the pictures I saw online, and then I think you sent me one, it was gray. So I'd like to, try and not ruin it. Usually they have the year they were made on the bottom somewhere. Oh, there it is, right there. Yeah, 2003. Hasbro likes to repackage stuff, so you gotta check. So anyway, I'm really excited to see the whenever that X-Wing is done. I need to get an X-Wing. That's one of the ones that has evaded since I haven't had an X-Wing since I was a kid, and the X-Wing's got to be one of the favorites, especially for me, other than the Millennium Falcon.
No, definitely. Yeah, the Falcon is like a must-have.
What Imperial ship here? Right, I think so. But my favorite Imperial ship is probably the transport ship from Return of the Jedi. The
Emperor shuttle.
The shuttle. Yeah, the train. Yeah, I love that ship. It's so cool, and I love that Kylo Ren ship in the sequel trilogy. Was kind of like that. Not his personal fighter, but the one he seemed to travel in. Like when they touched down on what planet was that? Was that Jakku?
In the very beginning.
Yeah, that was Jakku, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Alex Ross is with us. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Hey, Alex, how you doing?
Did you by chance get to see the pictures he put up on Facebook yesterday? He was on the Horror Syndicate stream, and I called him out. He's like, I got 28 lightsabers. I was like, show me. Oh my god, this guy's got so much cool stuff. I want to go to Alex's house to play.
Yeah, let's go. Let's have a battle.
Yes. Well, epic, and he's not too far from you. Yeah, you need to see it. It's cool.
I think he's near Owensboro, I believe. I think we met. They do a thing at the library there in Davis County where we shot our Encyclopedia Satanica. They have a thing called Unscripted, and they invite filmmakers to show their films, and usually short films. And you show your movie, and then it's free to the public. Anybody can come and watch it. And then you take Q&A. You do a Q&A with them, and then you do a live audio commentary. So it was really cool. I did it 2 or 3 times. I believe the last one I did, he was there.
Yeah, he seems like a really, really great guy. Very supportive, which I love people who are very supportive.
Wow, they were. He was awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, so we were going to talk a little bit about comics, and we were like, should we start with comics? Should we start with Star Wars? And then we realized that Star Wars kind of got us wanting to do comics, and definitely, I started writing stuff way back when I was like 17 in the early, well, mid 90s, on when they re-released the original trilogy in the theater. And then in 2002, well, about 2001, I started writing my own Star Wars sequel trilogy, and for comic form, and that's kind of where I got started. What about you? Well, did you start drawing first, or writing your own stories first, or both?
Oh, I was drawing first. I started drawing when I was 5, so 1981, I guess. And
Jeez.
yeah, so I grew, like, of course, 1981, like Star Wars was it. Like I grew up on Star Wars. That was the first. I always say that was the first thing to teach me heroic storytelling. Good versus evil, all that stuff.
Right.
So, I must have watched A New Hope, but I still call it Star Wars because that's what my generation, your generation, call it. I must have watched that movie all the time. I don't know how I saw it all the time because it was before VHS, and I guess it must have played on cable or television a lot. But I remember watching A New Hope a lot, and so like I was just watching it while I was painting on this, and just the little moments. And I was trying to think back of things. Like I remember, like I was watching the scene where Owen buys the droids. And I flashed back to say, I remember how worried I was that he wasn't going to take R2. Like, you have to take R2. Like, you're like stressed. Like, what? I remember that, like flashing back to
That'd have been the first big twist.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Star Wars was it, and I don't remember if I saw. I was 1 year old when the first one, so I didn't see that in theaters. I don't think we saw Empire in theaters. So I was only 4. I don't remember seeing it, but I vividly remember seeing Return of the Jedi. I was 7 years old, and I was just, it was just amazing. I think that one is probably my favorite, just because it had I was at the right age, it had such an impact. I got to see it on the big screen. I still remember walking out of the theater in tears, and my mom asking me, I just bawling my eyes out. And she's like, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "Because Luke's daddy died." And I remember saying that to her. And I thought, and when I look back at that, I think that's the power of Star Wars. That's the power of storytelling, is that I was crying for this fictional character who lost his dad. And, and the dad was the villain of the film. It was like that's the other thing. Is like I grew up in the generation where Darth Vader has always been the villain. Like if you grow up now, like how I was wondering, like, if you see Anakin Skywalker as a kid and you see that fall, but like I saw him walk onto that cruiser, and in Episode 4, just immediately oh, it's the bad dude. That's the scary bad guy. So I don't know who I'd be without George Lucas and Star Wars and Indiana Jones, because Raiders of the Lost Ark is just almost as important to me as Star Wars is. I must have watched Raiders of the Lost Ark on loop as a kid. Like to me, Harrison is Indiana Jones. It's between him and Han Solo. He's Indiana Jones to me. So,
and he likes Indiana Jones more anyway.
Yeah, and I think he just shows. He's just. He's great as Han, but I can't see. Even though Tom Selleck would have worked, I can't see anybody but Harrison Ford as that character.
I love Tom Selleck, but no.
Yeah, it's just Harrison just has this everyman thing about him, and
he does.
Same was like. Yeah, like that's like what I like about him, and like when we talk about 80s action stars, like him and Bruce Willis are probably my favorites, because they weren't muscle bound muscle heads. They were normal dudes, and
don't get me wrong, I love Arnold and everything, but yeah, I do prefer the diehard Bruce Willis. I'll watch anything with Bruce Willis in it, but Harrison Ford is one of my three favorite actors after Christopher Lee and Al Pacino. So I agree
Yeah,
with
because
you.
you take those two characters, you take Indiana and you take John McClane. They both go through hell. They both are just making it up as they go.
Yeah,
The whole
yeah.
it's not the years, it's the mileage. Like you see Indiana in pain, and you see John McClane in pain. You see the humanity in them, and that again, that one of my favorite lines is how are you going to do this? How am I going to get on that truck? I don't know. I'm making this up as I go. It's such a great line, and so George Lucas, I owe so much. So I think he was my early influence as far as leading me to being a comic book art creator. Of course, I got to mention at the same time, 2 years after I was born, Superman came out. So Richard Donner's two Superman movies were highly influential for me. To the point where, like, still to this day, my grandmother, when I go visit her or talk to her, she always has her vivid memory of me is running out the backyard with your Superman cape wrapped around your neck, because I always had the Superman cape on. I wore it all the time. I've got pictures of me as a kid at my birthday party with the Superman cape. And my first Halloween, I was Superman in my underoos. I've got like, and I got like Superman was the guy, and Luke Skywalker was my hero, and Indiana Jones. So
I know
those are my early influences.
I had Han Solo's blaster when I was a kid, and I never went anywhere without that. But I had a baby blanket that I was able to tie around my neck and put the hood on, so I was Luke from Return of the Jedi, all the time. So, and it was white too, so it didn't really work as well. But
yeah, I remember going into Toys R Us, and when they had that little barrel in 1983 of the lightsabers, Luke's green saber and Vader's red saber. So I remember getting that, and I had that Han Solo blaster. Got one upstairs to the original.
I saw mine. Yeah,
and it's like I got a picture of me on Facebook with me coming around a corner with that blaster in like an 83 or whatever, my Jedi shirt on. And yes, and I still to this day say, that my favorite Christmas was that Christmas, because that's the year when I got the Luke Skywalker figure, the Jedi black suit, hood, and I got the Jabba's Palace playset. And so I remember like that was my favorite Christmas. And when I went to LA for the first time, there's in Burbank, there's like, you got Dark Delicacies and all on that road. I think it's Magnolia. There's like all these amazing stores on that road. And there was a toy shop in there. And I went in a toy shop, and they had those Gentle Giant oversized Star Wars figures, I think 10-inch figures in the original package and all that. So they had the Luke Jedi, and I was like, "Fuck, I want this!" And it was about $100 or something. And so we went back to the place. I was with some people, and the very next morning, I told the guys, like, we need to go back down there because I'm buying it. And so we went straight there that morning, and I bought it, but it was going to be too big to take on the plane.
Oh,
and then, shit. And so I had to pay them, and they said they would package it up and ship it. But that was the only thing, other than I think I bought a Shining shirt. So my trip to LA, I bought a Shining shirt and that Luke.
Not touristy stuff. You bought Star Wars.
No.
I do the same thing. Me and my wife, we went to Celebration. No, we went to Star Wars weekends down in Orlando in 2006. I was actually going to propose to her that weekend, but I got way too nervous. But anyway, on the way, we stopped at every single Walmart to see if they had different Star Wars figures and stuff like that. And then when we got to, we wore costumes. I've got pictures on Facebook. When we got to the park, it was great. We actually got thrown out of the park because we were in costume, and there was a line forming of kids trying to autograph with us. We didn't even get to go into the park. It was all Star Wars, and we were right by this shop called Tatooine Traders, and so these kids just were lining up trying to get autographs from me, and she was dressed up as Padme, and it was so bizarre. But we got walked out of Disney for that, all because we were dressed up, and we didn't get to enjoy the park that day. And Star Wars weekends activities that were going on. It was terrible, but fun at the same time. Because everybody loves Star Wars,
Yeah, man. It's just, you think about it's just amazing how many wonderful characters are in there. From, like, when we watch this Mandalorian finale, and we're hit with, oh my God, it's Luke Skywalker. And Baby Yoda, of course, a lot of our appeal to that is because we all love Yoda.
Yeah.
And so to see a baby Yoda or Grogu, whatever, and then they hit you with R2D2 rolls in, and like everything about R2, like especially from a kid's perspective, like I'm watching it again earlier today, while I was working, and that part where R2, you can tell what he's saying, where he says like he's worried that Luke doesn't like him. And he's like, and C-3PO's like, no, I don't think he likes you. And he goes, do you? It's like this.
Yeah, do you?
He's
Yep.
like, no, I don't like you either. It's so great. It's such a wonderful. I'm so thankful that I had that as a kid. That those films and those heroes and everything. Everything's so perfect. Chewbacca and Han and Leia, and I mean,
did we not just grow up in a great time? I mean, the 80s. We talk about it all the time in the Horror Syndicate, but I mean, first of all, you got A New Hope all the time. I saw Empire all the time, to where I got sick of seeing. I want to see the trash compactor scene. That's my favorite scene in all of Star Wars for some reason. And excuse me, I never got to see it. You know, I always had to see the snow battle on Hoth and the pin cut off. I didn't realize how special that was back then. I was like 2 or 3 years old, you know, and then Jedi comes out and I saw that all the time, but I still didn't get to see A New Hope enough. I did eventually, of course. That's my favorite, I think, of all. I go flip-flop between A New Hope and Revenge of the Sith. I think Revenge of the Sith is amazing.
Yeah. New Hope, I mean, you got all of that. And then you got Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Kenobi is one of my favorite characters. And
me too.
When he meets Luke and he's giving him the saber.
That story when he meets Luke, takes him to the hut, you know, of 1,000 generations. You know, that just gives me like, ooh, I said it and I got a little bit of goosebumps going on here. The way he delivered lines in that movie, you know.
Hell of an actor, man. I mean, I can't imagine anyone other than Alec. And I mean, as amazing of a career that he had, you know, it almost defines him. I'm sure there's, you know, the generation before us, or, you know, a few other things he did, like Lady Killers, and of course, Bridge on the River Kwai, and
which that one. I wouldn't have known about those if not for Star Wars, and I went back and watched a lot of his older movies because he was in them. So Star Wars was an opening or a gateway to Alec Guinness. So he's a brilliant actor, just all the way through. Even though he, from what I hear, he thought Star Wars was preposterous, but you know what? He still did the job and did a great job. So.
Him and Donald Pleasance. All right, I don't get this, so don't do it, but I'll do it. And then that's what Donald's known for is Loomis, and that's the way he felt about it. I was like, I don't get this. I don't really care for the script. It's so silly. But you know, maybe that's just the Brit. I mean, you listen to the, like Mark talked about it, how on set, you know, all those British people are like snickering and laughing at, what is this? What is this movie? And I guess that kind of makes sense because it really was, you know, a kid's movie, and it was. I have to imagine it was kind of silly because everything that came before Star Wars that was like Star Wars was a bit goofy. And because it wasn't like there was something about Star Wars that worked because he used these classic themes and Kurosawa's inspiration and the old Westerns that worked. And then he, I think one of the most effective things was he made it a used universe. It wasn't.
Yeah, urban universe. Yeah, absolutely.
And I've never been a big sci-fi guy, really. And I think it's kind of weird that I love Star Wars, but I don't see Star Wars as sci-fi. I see it as fantasy. I see it as like barbarians and stuff. And because science fiction is usually about the science. It's usually about
story, really, though, if you think about it.
Yeah, it's not about. They're not telling you how light speed works, and they're not telling you how a lightsaber works. Like science fiction is. It's not about the technology or the things going on. It's like, this is just what it is. This is a microwave and this is a lightsaber. You know, it's like, it's just there. That's what we use. And, you know, this is just our ship. It's just like my Toyota. It's not a big deal that it's a ship. You know, it's like,
I mean, they call the Millennium Falcon right away a piece of junk.
Yeah.
It's like, what? That thing's a piece of junk? You know?
And it's almost like a great moment in Force Awakens where it's garbage or whatever, and it's like the Falcon sitting over there like, holy shit, you know. So,
That piece of
Yeah.
garbage.
Yeah. So yeah, that was it. That early inspiration. I credit everything as far as my creativity, my inspiration. It started with Star Wars. I can't think of any, Star Wars, Superman.
Yeah.
It
So,
had
well,
to be those two.
Star Wars Batman for me. So
Well, Batman. I didn't fall in love with Batman until Tim Burton's movie came out.
really, well,
Yeah,
I lived in
I
North
don't know.
Carolina. I was gonna say I lived in North Carolina, and we got the '60s show, and that was like my first exposure, probably in '87. And then I was like, "Mom, I want to see more of this." So she took me to the comic book store, and right before Jason Todd died, it were the first comics I ever got. So I got to fall in love with Jason Todd. Then he died, and then
Yeah.
so yeah. Go ahead.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I didn't read comics as a kid. I don't remember ever having comics. I didn't read comic books. I knew of these. I knew the Christopher Reeve movies. I grew up with them. I watched Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. The cartoon stuff. I had the superpowers action figures growing up.
Oh, those were awesome too.
Yeah, I had all that stuff. But I had Batman bed sheets and things, or Superman bed sheets. I had all that stuff. T-shirts. My mom would buy me stuff. But the '60s show was not on that I know of where I was.
It was on a religious channel, by the way, which is the weirdest thing.
Yeah, I remember. I didn't see the Adam West show until Burton's movie came out, and they started playing it on like Nickelodeon or something like reruns. I don't remember what channel it was, but
so it was that channel 700 Club, whatever that was. You remember that? The 700 Club, I think was what it was. It was where I was. Some weird. It was like, when's Batman coming on? I don't want to watch this. People arguing about stuff, politics or whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, Batman was like, he was there and I was aware of him, but he was still kind of, it was before, I wasn't aware of the Denny O'Neil Batman. I wasn't aware of, this was before Frank Miller. So, DC Comics and all that, I didn't read them. And I knew of these characters. I knew who Batman, I knew the Joker, I knew Robin, I knew all that, but I didn't really know them until Tim Burton's movie came out. And it was when I saw Tim Burton's movie in the theater. I was 13, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I was obsessed with it. And I started buying Detective Comics, and Norm Brayfogle was the artist at the time, and I was like emulating him and learning from him. And then I'd see advertisements with in the ad, you'd see like Bernie Wrightson's The Cult drawings in there from Batman, and so I'd start seeing that image of the Dark Knight Returns, that jumping with the lightning striking and things. So I didn't get to reading those until shortly after that. But I started buying the Detective Comics, and I started drawing them, and then started. What happened was, it's so funny. Like, as far as starting comic books, now my first comic book was actually in 1984. I was in fourth grade. I have some images from it. My grandmother, when she passed away, she had some of them. And
oh, really?
But I drew it. I think I've got it on Facebook, like some of my drawings. But I had a friend. I drew it with a friend, and it was 1984. So like the biggest thing in my world at that time was G.I. Joe and the Transformers, so.
Oh, big time back then. Yeah.
Yeah. So Snake Eyes and Optimus Prime and all that stuff was like everything to me at that time. 84. Yeah. I'm like 8 years old. So I took like my love of Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow and my love of Transformers, and I made this Ninja Bots comic book with my friend.
Oh, I think you told us about this before. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you see Fear for Sinners here, my Christmas segment in Volumes of Blood 2, the toy that she gets for her son is Ninja Bot. And it's the figure, the character that I did back in 84. I think I got it up in the closet, the box prop. But so when we were making that movie, I was like, I'm going to bring back Ninja Bots. Put that in there. But I did that when I was in fourth grade.
You should make that your thing for all your movies. You gotta see him with a kid in Dark and Bloody Ground. Throw a Ninja Bot in there.
I thought
It's the
about it
80s
because the
too.
movie takes place in the 80s,
Yeah,
and
do
I
it.
I had thought about it, and then I saw it. I may try to work it in because I saw it in the closet the other day.
You
I'm like,
should.
shit, there it is, and I'm sitting there thinking like, where can I put it? Because we're almost done, and I'm like, where would I put
Mhm.
it? So there is one scene where I had the kid who's kind of based on me. He has one more scene left. I don't know if it'll work, but I could just play around with it and put it in there. But that was my first comic. But I started drawing Batman at 13, 1989,
Mhm.
and then um, it's funny. I don't think I've told this one. Um, Somehow I was watching the Bozo Show. Did you guys watch the Bozo Show, the one in
Oh
Chicago?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. WGN.
So
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
near Chicago. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
you
yeah,
would
yeah. I'm about
um,
5 hours away, but it was down here. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. So I was watching the Bozo Show, and they had this guest couple on there. I don't know who they were. I had to try to find them, but it was an older man and older woman. They were a married couple, and I think she wrote comics and he drew them. So they were on there as being interviewed, and what they did was they called some kids out of the audience, and basically the husband would ask the kids questions, and he would design a comic book character for them,
Hmm.
and so he would draw that for them, and say, well, what is it? A man, is a woman? What's their power? What colors? All that, and he would draw them a comic book character right there on the show. And so I did that with the neighborhood kids. I went home and I started doing that with my friends, like, hey, let's make characters. And so I think shortly after that, I started buying more comics, and I fell upon the X-Men.
Mm.
That's around the time with Jim Lee and Mark Silvestri was drawing it. Of course, Chris Claremont,
Yeah. By the
and
way,
I fell.
you gotta know that talks more than you. By the way, Chris Claremont. You get him going, he doesn't stop.
I did meet him, but he didn't talk much. I had him sign my favorite issue of
Just
Uncanny
don't
X-Men
ask
with.
about the X-Men movies, okay? That's where he,
Oh,
that's where he goes.
well, I got that. I didn't know at the time about his resentment towards Lee because I didn't know the whole story that was going on there. As far as like they basically took, like, Jim Lee was suddenly given creative direction on what he had to write and what he wanted to draw, and like I can imagine, like, you've been working on X-Men for 15 years, and this little fucker comes in and telling you what to write, what stories you're going to do. So like my favorite issue is it's the second Extinction Agenda issue that Jim and Chris did, where it's like Wolverine, Psylocke, and Jubilee teamed up going into Genosha. So just like them on the cover
Mhm.
fighting Cameron Hodge. So I've got it autographed by Jim Lee and Scott Williams. So I wanted to get Chris to sign it, and I took it up there. When I handed it to him, he kind of like was flipping through it, looking at it, and he did. And he just kind of went, Jim was pretty good, but my preferred artist for X-Men was Mark Silvestri, I think. He was like,
That's
I was like,
funny.
yeah, I love Mark too, but I was like, so then when I watched like the Image documentary that came out and talked about how, Chris, what they did to Chris because Jim was so popular,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, there's why. Okay, he acted like that. That was a little jab at Jim, but like Jim became like my favorite artist. So so what I did was, of
Yeah.
course, as you're a kid, what you do is you just emulate. Like you said, Star Wars. You started writing Star Wars comics. I was
Yeah.
writing my own version of the X-Men comics. It wasn't like the X-Men, but they were inspired by them, and so I had characters. Uh, I ended up calling once I got into high school the next year. I created them as this comic called Top Force, and
Mm.
I actually got it in the new movie. Speaking of the movies, like in Dark and Bloody Ground, the
Oh,
little
really?
boy's
You
bedroom,
said
and
that's
the little
early
boy's,
'90s, right?
huh?
Is that's about early '90s? Because that sounds like a total
Yeah,
early '90s title.
yeah, 1990, 1991, yeah, yeah, and they got all
Yeah.
the pouches and all that shit.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's like, yeah. So
Dude.
if you look in the new movie and you see on the wall in the little boy's bedroom, there's a Top Force poster on the wall. I
Nice.
redrew the characters. I hadn't drawn them in like 15, 20 years. So I was like, I'm going to put my comic book in there because I needed 80s like posters that would have worked there that I don't have, that I don't have to have a license for, but look like 80s stuff. So I was like, I'll do some of my old comic book posters. And then I did a book cover in Brazil a few years ago that they wanted kind of a Frazetta style cover, like Barbarians. It was like a fantasy book. So I did this cover. So I wrote them and said, hey, can I take that? And I made that look like, it looks like a Conan the Barbarian movie poster or something. That's on the door in the kid's bedroom. So anytime I could take stuff from my past and throw it in there. Because that's another thing in the 80s we didn't talk about was the fantasy. I mentioned Star Wars being a fantasy, but like that was also the big thing was Beastmaster and Clash of the Titans and Conan and
especially Conan. Many memories of Conan when I was a kid.
Yeah, and then Dungeons and Dragons was a big deal, and I used to look at the comic books or the books, the Dungeons and Dragon artwork. Like I had the art of Dragonlance, which was like my Bible as an artist, as a young artist, and then discovered Frank Frazetta and all that. But it's what's interesting is like that Dragonlance stuff. Most of those guys were from Kentucky, and I didn't realize until so like. I was probably 12 or so, 11 or 12 years old, and I was visiting my aunt in Litchfield, or near Litchfield. They don't live in Litchfield, but near Litchfield, Kentucky, and it's rural. And so my aunt is like, oh, there's this artist in downtown Litchfield at the courthouse, and he's doing a signing or something. And she's like, well, who is it? She said. And we looked it up, and it was his name was Larry Elmore. And I went, Larry Elmore? Like, I've been worshiping this guy for like 5 years. It's like he lives in Litchfield. So we went down to the courthouse, and I met him. And like my cousin's girlfriend would model for him and stuff. And I know some other people who know him. So I've gotten to talk to him and meet him a couple of times. What's really interesting is like at least 4 or 5 of those guys that drew for Dragonlance were from Kentucky. And I talked to him and Jeff Easley. I met him, and they didn't know each other. It was just this, and they didn't work on that in Kentucky. It was like up in like Wisconsin or Minnesota or something. So it was like, it was just this weird coincidence that all of them were from Kentucky, all those artists.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
A lot of good artists. By the way, we got a question from Seth T. Miller. Says, Nate, you're an artist?
No, I'm a movie critic.
Yeah. Yes. That's an art form. And then Alex said that X-Wing you've been painting is really. We got some comments, but you'll see them on the after show. No, just keep going.
No, okay. So how about you? Like as far as you did the Star Wars comic books, when did you start creating your own characters and doing your own storylines? And like for me, with what you asked about story, like I definitely started writing, and my early comics were kind of like the Marvel way, where you just write it. You draw it, and there was no fucking story. It was just like, ooh, pow, wow, boom, boom, all that shit. And then, so once I got into what really made me, I started writing because I had to write, that kind of thing, because I was an artist. But it wasn't until I got into, I got into college, and my freshman year of college, I took a writing class. And the teacher that I had she was a writer on Northern Exposure, I think. It was right before the show canceled, I think. And so I took this writing class, and it was 1994, and I had to write this piece, and Pulp Fiction had just come out. And we had to write like an experience. So I had gone to see like Pulp Fiction like 5 times or something. So I'm going to write about going to the movie theater and watching Pulp Fiction. I became a fan of Quentin Tarantino that year, and so writing became a thing. Like, oh, you can. So I started getting really interested in writing because of Quentin Tarantino and Richard Linklater and Kevin Smith, all these filmmakers I was getting into, and so I started writing. I wrote this paper, and I got like an A in like every paper I wrote. I got an A, and the instructor said, "You've got a talent. You're very good. You're a good writer." And I never even thought of myself as a writer. And I just kind of got the bug in my freshman year in college, to the point where I preferred the writing. I guess because it was a new challenge. I'd been drawing my whole life. it's like the filmmaking. I'm all into filmmaking because I it's something new. It's something, even though I've been doing it for
Right.
10 years, it's still something new. So um, that's how I became a writer. But as far as you, and I know you weren't. I mean, I imagine you doodled or something because you're a creative person and you grew up with the same stuff I did. I'm sure
Oh,
you
I
drew.
tried drawing. I
Yeah,
drew first. Yeah, I tried. I took art classes in high school, and I got into painting with acrylics like heavily in the mid '90s. But as far as writing goes, I took a creative writing class because I wanted to learn how to write. Because I'd read, actually, oddly, it was Preacher. You remember the Preacher comic? It
yeah.
came out when I was in high school. Yeah, and Garth Ennis, and I was like, God, this is a comic with a story. Which, like you said before, there are a lot of comics we read, other than because I read Nightfall. You know, the Batman story was one of the big events I read, and there's a
Yeah.
big story arc that goes through that and storytelling. But Preacher was like showing me that there's more than just superheroes. And then later, I think it was '97 or '98, The Long Halloween came out. My favorite Batman story. I'm like, this is what I want to do is write comics that have a big story like this that have. And so Jeff Loeb became a huge influence on me, and of course I did go back when they started re-releasing the X-Men stuff that Chris Claremont wrote, and started reading a lot of his stuff because he had like a lot of great story. I mean, think of the big story arcs like the Days of Future Past, the Dark Phoenix stuff, all that good stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's just the mid '90s really kind of. But the thing that really got me was when I picked up my first Dark Horse Star Wars comic, and I had no idea that there were like I read the Zahn books.
Yeah.
We've talked about that too about how great Timothy Zahn is. But I didn't realize that Dark Horse had all these comics that like Crimson Empire, Dark Empire, and even the Thrawn trilogy was released. And I was like, I could probably try writing a Star Wars comic, and I did. It took a few years, but I submitted it to Dark Horse, but they said that it was I had no idea what was it called. Not
Unsolicited.
Yeah, yeah. So, but the writer he contacted me separately and said I had a lot of good ideas in there just to keep at it. Uh, Randy Stradley's his name from Dark Horse. So he contacted me separately. I still have a letter, the rejection letter too. It was awesome. It was awesome to hear back. On Dark Horse's website, they say they don't read every single submission, and more than likely you won't get a response. I got 2 responses, so I felt like, oh, maybe
That's
there's
that,
something here. So yeah,
that's awesome, man.
yeah, yeah, I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, when you get a response. I mean, like I said,
Yeah,
most of them
especially
don't.
right. Most people don't like. I've talked to so many writers who've never gotten a response from any company, and that's Dark Horses at the time was probably the third or fourth. I mean, you got Image, DC, and Marvel. I think Dark Horse was one of the big 4 or 5 publishers when I did that. So it was like, I'm not even mad about it. This just means I'm going in the right direction. So, but of course, I stopped writing Star Wars because it was a dead end, and I just
Yeah, fan
started trying
fiction.
to
I
create my
mean,
own stuff. I had my own stuff, like, but Star Wars was what I wanted to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's where Knights of Bellaterra came from, and Stellar Odyssey, the comic that I've been working on with Jay at Unparalleled. So, yeah, it's
yeah,
been a long road, and it's fine. I finally have published work. It took forever finding artists, and because I can't draw, I tried so hard, but like I'm very impatient when it comes to drawing. Like I have a few pieces of art that I drew back in high school of baseball players and football players, and that was painstaking trying to do that because it was for a grade, and I don't have the patience to even try to learn it. I've tried so hard over the years, and it just sometimes I think it does come natural, but I know there's a lot of hard work behind it too. Like you can just draw just about anything, and I can.
yeah. But
It's
like you said, it's not like I've been doing this since I was 5. So it's like 1981. Like people are like, I wish I could do that. I'm like, well, you've got to draw every day. Again, like my
right.
grandma talking about me running out the backyard with my cape on. She also talks about you were always sitting in front of the TV with your cape on, with your coloring book, and you would draw. And I remember I didn't color the coloring book. I flipped to the blank page on the opposite side of the cover with my black crayon, and
Yeah.
I was drawing. So that was Nathan, was like watching TV and drawing. And he's like, I don't know how you watched and drew at the same time, but like that kind of is still what I do now. Like like I'm inspired by what I'm watching, and
Hmm.
I'm drawing, and it's like this. That's my happy place. That was my childhood of just being inspired by these things, and then translated them there. And you talked about reading those books in the mid '90s and saying,
Hmm.
"Oh, this is what you can do with comic books." Like I remember I had that moment too, where I was doing all the superhero shit through high school, and then I got into college, and again, I fell in love with film. I became a big film fan, where someone introduced me to Reservoir Dogs, and I was just off to the races with film. But also that year, right before college, right before the year started, The Crow came out,
Oh man.
and I saw The Crow, and I went, "Holy shit! You can do this! Like this can be a comic book. You could tell this kind of deep storytelling and these kind of characters in a comic
Yep.
book." And then shortly after that, I picked up Sin City, The Hard
Mm.
Goodbye. And I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
"Holy shit!" Like
I got to
so,
those late, unfortunately.
huh?
I got to those later, like in the early 2000s. Shortly when I found out Sin City was going to be a movie, it was after I saw The Crow when I first read a Crow book. But yeah, when I found Sin City was going to be a movie, I was like, oh, I should read these. I was
Yeah.
never a big Frank Miller guy though.
I fell in love with Sin City right away. Like it was just like that first book with Marv. I was like, wow,
Mhm.
this is something. And then The Crow was just so unique, and I was just very cerebral. I still am the overthinker, the very sensitive,
Yeah.
over like emotional. So The Crow really totally hit me, and so I was taking. Yeah, I always talk about that. Like when you're a young man and you have a good heart or you're a sensitive person, and you start like you get that culture shock of, oh, the world is not that nice, the people are shitty. And so I took like that, and I took all these films I was watching, my love of like Tarantino and John Woo and all that stuff, and then
Mhm.
I took like Sin City and The Crow, and I made this comic called The Malevolent, and it
Mm.
was also
Oh,
inspired by Garbage. I had fallen in love with Garbage, the band, and
was that?
Shirley Manson.
Did you produce that and sell that one?
Yeah, the Malevolent's been
It was on
realized.
your old website, I think, right? The Rebel Rouser.
Yeah, like
Yeah, I
right.
thought.
What happened with the Malevolent? I started it. I created it in '96, and I drew an issue, like a 30-page issue, and I didn't know shit about publishing or starting your own comic book. I
Yeah.
think I did send it out, like you talked about getting a response. I sent it out, I think, to a couple. I think I sent it to Dark Horse. I think I sent it to. Dude, I never heard back from anybody, but I sent it to one company. I can't remember the name, but they were a known publisher.
Hmm.
But I didn't, I just sent it to everybody. But after I sent it out, I realized that like their normal thing, but they did a lot of more humor books. They didn't really do like my book was very violent or and kind of moody and dark and like Batman and Crow and Sin City and all that. And so it's like an urban crime book set in kind of the near future, almost like Escape from New York or Mad Max,
Oh
that
wow,
kind of thing. So
right up Seth's alley.
yeah, so it was like it was totally that near future, almost like almost post apocalypse, but there was no apocalypse. But it's like the world has been taken over by a plague, but the plague is not a virus. It's a plague of just malevolence. People are just fucking evil. Like people, like conscience has just been erased, and like everyone is just
So it takes
awful.
place in 2020.
Yeah, it's takes place in 2020, and like, but like the main character is this guy who is not that way. He's he comes from a Christian background. He has these morals, but he has to betray that to survive. He has to go against his beliefs and his heart and feeling to survive in this ugly world. And the reason he does is because he has a little sister who is now like a teenager, but she's grown up in this element, and she
Mhm.
is as badass and as dangerous as anyone. And that's who my daughter's actually named after, Lily. Her name was Lily.
Nice.
Yeah. But the
Yep.
character was based off of Shirley Manson from Garbage, because when I
Well,
saw
of course.
Garbage, yeah, when I saw Garbage, I thought, wow, she's so like she's gorgeous, but she's like got this darkness or something darkness, but she's also like,
she looked dangerous.
yeah, there's something dangerous. And someone, I think Butch Vig said that some critic called her poison candy.
Oh,
And I went, that's it. Like, it's just like she looks like she, because when Shirley came out in the beginning, she had this little baby doll dress and knee high boots and this little, she looked like almost like a girl. But there's something behind the eyes and the attitude and the lyrics and the things that was dark. And I thought I could take that and I can make a comic book character. I actually got to give the comic to her. I met her. It's like 2005, and like gave her the comic. She thought it was the coolest thing in the world. She's like, "Oh, thank you for turning me into a comic book character." And
that's so cool.
So yeah, I said you inspired this thing, and but that's what inspired that character. So I wrote the comic, and it was the first issue was. The first kind of story arc was about a serial killer that I based off Freddy. I put all these things in there. So it wasn't based on Freddy, it's based on Freddy and like Albert Fish and all. Like I took all these characters, but like he was a mortician who was a serial killer who's killing these strippers, Sin City influence. And these strippers like danced at a bar called the Boiler Room. And, it was like this, yeah, it was like this strip bar that looked like a boiler room, and like so he was murdering them, and anyways, like this kind of Sin City-ish kind of world, and the Crow kind of world, and V for Vendetta kind of world, and all that kind of thing, and Escape from New York. In many ways you could say it's almost Escape from New York, if Snake Plissken were a very moral guy and was like living there and had to protect his little sister kind of thing, because Escape from New York is basically.
Do you even have any more of these?
I'm
gonna have to. I need to read them now.
I need to reprint it. It's because I drew it and I tried to send it off. That company I sent it to, the guy, he wrote me back. The guy that ran the company wrote me back, and he said,
Alex Ross says that there was a bar in Owensboro called the Boiler Room.
I think I went there once. I think we went there for the premiere of Volumes of Blood afterwards, after party, maybe. Because I remember like a boiler. I think a boiler being in there. But, this is like 96 when I made this. But,
right.
So yeah, I sent it to this guy. He was the owner of the publishing company. And he said, this is really good. You need to pursue it. You need to send it to Image or somebody. He said, because we don't do comics like this. Otherwise, I would publish it. But, but I was just like I was so insecure. I didn't believe in myself at all, and I just thought that was too big for me. Like I come from Kentucky. I just had this very small, fearful way about me where I was too afraid to take risks, and I looked at it. And back then, this is before the internet was a big deal. Like the internet was a main thing. Like without the internet, you're like, what do I do? Where do I go? Who do I like? How does this work? When you have no idea, you have no information. There's no like online printers, and there's no guidebook. There's like, how do I get this going? And I had done a few right out of college. There was a guy I met named Lance, who him and his buddies were starting a comic book company. They put out an ash can, and they had me do the second ash can, and it was like this fantasy cyborg ninja kind of comic book. And I did the second issue, and I don't think it ever came out. I penciled it, and so that was the closest I came. I think I had like an alternate cover that was published for them, but I had no idea. Like, to me, that was the only thing you could do, was send it off to one of these printers, spend all this money because it was so expensive then. Forget color, like it was, because there weren't comic book publishers that I was aware of. Like, it was just printers, people who just do printing, and like you send it to them and like, oh, you got to order 1,000 copies, and each unit is this much and all that. So it wasn't until later. I think in 1999, I contacted a printer to see if I could print Malevolent, the first book. It was like a 30-page book. And the price they gave me, I was like, how am I going to afford that? And why would how do I sell it? like I could take it to these local shops, but
Yeah.
you know, you go to local shops, they want 50, they'll give you 50% of the cover price, but then
Yep.
like, but the printing's more than that. You know, you can't charge that much. So it was like this. I was just overwhelmed, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I kind of sat on it a couple more years, and then I met my wife in 2001, and she kind of gave me that confidence. Like because I just felt like someone who wasn't normal. Like I was never very good with women and did social things. So I had it was really awkward and depressed and dark. I think that's why Dark Taxi Driver is like my favorite movie, because I was like, I was Travis Bickle for a while as a young man. Like I was like
Well,
completely alone and completely depressed and
yeah.
completely in a dark place. And my wife pulled me out of that. She showed me love. She showed me I had more than just my art, because that's all I felt I had to offer in the world was my art. And I think I felt like if I failed at this, if I fail at my art, if I put my art out there, if I fail at this, then I have fucking nothing, because I am a nothing person and I have nothing to offer people but my art. And if it sucks, I'm going to be like, what do I do then? So that's how dark I was at that time. Like I just was so afraid to do anything. And so that's why it was like in my 30s when I finally actually took risks and wrote Horror Hound magazine and things like it. But it was in 2001, I met a guy I went to college with who was doing this local thing called Feral Comics. And they were doing web comics. And there was a guy that,
Sounds familiar.
I don't know if you ever saw it. I mean, we were small. There was a guy that was
I know,
working
but
with
I
them.
don't know why it sounds familiar.
There was a guy that was working with him who had inked for Marvel in the 70s or something. And he actually never ended up doing the books. But we put this out, and I put the first 8 pages of Malevolent book 1 into this anthology. His Feral Comics Presents book. It was like 2003. And we printed it, and it was, you know, each of us, I think, had to pay like $250 to print it. Like there's 4 of us, I think, working on it then. So about $1,000. I think we got like maybe 500 copies or something. And we each got it, and we went to we went to a Mid Ohio Con in Columbus, Ohio. And it was like the first comic convention I think I went to, because like I remember Lou Ferrigno was there, and John Byrne, and John Russo was sitting across from us from Night of the Living Dead, and and Kane Hodder was there. But that was the first convention I went to, and we didn't sell anything. We went to Nashville, did shows there. We did shows in Louisville. We did a comic book signing. It was so funny. We did a comic book signing in Pulp Comics right across the bridge from Louisville in Indiana. And I remember they were advertising the news, the local news advertised it. And we're like, oh man, we're going to have people show up. Again, I've talked about this, like you've got to learn that no one gives a fuck right away, because you think, oh, I got my comic. Because when I got my first comic, I was like, holy shit, I got a comic book. I've been waiting for this forever, and everybody's going to love this. And so we did our book signing. They advertised it on the news, Louisville's news, and we're like, all right, and we're doing it. We go there. It's like a Saturday morning, and it snowed really bad. So there was like a snowstorm, and we didn't know also that the Wildcats were playing that day. Oh. So if the Kentucky Wildcats are playing in Kentucky, no one's fucking doing anything but watching that ball game. Right. So no one came. I think we sold maybe one comic at the shop. But at the same time, we used to go to these shows, and we wouldn't sell shit. But it was like, I got to go to the show. I got to hang out with my friends, and we just sat at our booth and bullshitted and laughed and had a good time. So it was fun. You got to go away. You stayed in a hotel room, and you went to the show, and you just hung out. Maybe there were some celebrities there. I remember we did. Eric Powell was sitting across from us at one show, in this little show in Nashville. Like it's the guy, the goon, and that's cool. And, so those were good times, but we weren't getting anywhere with it. But I was hooked. The moment I got that first comic, I wanted another one. And it took a year before we got the next issue out. So it took like a year or two. By the third comic book, we had Comic Express had come out.
Oh yeah.
And so Comic Express was this one where you didn't have to order 1,000 copies or 500 copies. You could order one copy,
It wasn't
And
print on demand, wasn't it?
yeah, so like it
Yeah.
was just a husband and wife team, and I've got a great story about them. Um, Unfortunately, they're no longer in business,
Mm.
but I worked with them on a few comics. Once I discovered them and I could afford it, and they would also print trade paperbacks and binding and graphic
Oh,
novels. I'm like,
they did all that by
yeah,
themselves? Wow.
so I was like, shit. So I was kind of held back from the other guys because they were kind of moving slower.
Mm.
Once I realized I can afford this and I can, so I moved right away to finish my trade paperback first. Like I had 3 books written for Malevolent that would have been like a $250 50-page opus kind of thing. So so they were broken up in like 3 different storylines, but they all kind of
Is that
went
how much you
together.
have done of that?
What's that?
How many you have that much content for that book?
I finished 250 pages because I had the first trade paperback came out in 2006. It's called The Boiler Mortician, and it was about the whole serial killer thing. And
Right.
it was, like I said, it was black and white. I just feverishly drew it. Again, I wasn't doing anything but working at UPS. I think I was working at Staples at the time too as my second job because my wife and I got married in 2003. So I was doing that comic book, and I published it myself in 2006. The other guys kind of teetered off.
There it is.
Yeah, the Malevolent. Yeah, that's the first book.
Yep.
And so I actually was able to give that to James O'Barr too when I met him, and said,
Nice.
this is why this exists because you. I just remember when it's funny when he looked through it because I drew it in '99 and I met James in like 2010 or so, so it'd been 10 years, and he's like, I was actually a guest show and we were right next to each other, so I got
Dude,
to hang out with him all
the art in
weekend
this,
long.
I'm looking at your website. The art in this is fucking, dude, you're killing me. This is good stuff.
Oh, thanks. So
Yeah.
I was looking through it. Or I gave it to James, and he's looking through it. And he goes, "You got better." And he was really cool. Like he said, he goes, "I don't really get to draw anymore, but I do still write. And maybe if I have something come along, maybe I can have you illustrate something." So
Wow.
that hasn't happened, but that just enough him
Still,
saying that. Yeah.
yeah, coming from his mouth, that'd mean a lot, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
So. But yeah, I printed the first trade paperback in 2006, and then I did the next one, I think the next year. And I think 2008, I printed the 2007. Yeah, the 2007, I did the second book, and I did a horror comic because the guys at Farrell wanted to do a horror comic anthology called Splatter. And they tried it twice. And the first time they did it, we were doing a Romero tribute, and I did a book called A Wish for the Dead. And it was a zombie short. And they didn't finish their thing. I think I did like 5 pages and stopped because they weren't going to do it. And then they came back and said, "We want to do it for Halloween again." And so I had written this screenplay for a movie called Girl Number 3.
Yeah. So did you do an actual comic? Because I'm looking at I'm going to pull that up too, if you don't mind.
Girl Number 3 wasn't a full comic because what I wanted to do it, but we were doing an anthology. So, well, how can I fit it into an anthology? Because that's going to be at least a 100-page comic book because the story was too big.
Yeah.
And so what if I did like what Bernie Wrightson did with Frankenstein, where he did those illustrations? So what if I wrote it like a novella, and I drew key moments in the book? And so that's what I did with Girl Number 3. And they kind of were falling behind again. It's like, fuck it. So I finished Wish for the Dead, and I printed them both together. Yeah, that was the cover for Wish for the Dead. And so I printed the cover. But the reason I bring those up is I sent them off to be printed. I actually had another comic called Final Days, which was a action comic that only printed 1 issue. That was kind of a farewell to one of my characters from Top Force because I wanted to kind of say good farewell to him. Yeah, Final Days. And so I did those 2. But what happens is I sent those 2 off to the printer, and my wife had gone to the doctor and she had a cancer scare.
Oh, geez.
And as soon as that happened, I thought, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen. So I wrote the publisher, Comic Express, and I said, hey, my wife, we may have a medical problem here, and I don't want to spend money on this. If you haven't printed it yet, just please don't print it.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy, I wish I knew his name. I'm horrible with names, but he was the guy that ran Comic Express. He said, I tell you what, he goes, let me go ahead and print these for you, and you just pay me when you get the money. He goes, and I said, no. I said, I don't want to owe anybody anything. It's like that. So I really appreciate that, but I don't want to I don't like owing people stuff.
All right.
So he said, well, let me tell you what, let me give you a gift. Let me print 20 copies of each as a gift to you. Because we all fall on hard times or have problems in life. He goes, so let me do that for you. So I accepted. Because he did that, I took them to my job. I took them to UPS, and I just started handing them out to the people who bought the other comics. So I can't charge for this. These were a gift, and luckily my wife was fine.
That's good.
But I never forgot he did that, and I was able to give it. And one of the people I gave it to that night, girl number 3, was a guy who wanted to make films, Herschel Zahn. He was a supervisor at UPS, and he took it home. He read it, gave it to his wife. She read it, and they were in the middle of making their first movie, and they said, fuck that movie. We want to make this. And they called me up and said, we want to make this a movie. And that was the original intention for Girl Number 3. So they we want you to write the screenplay, and we want to make this our first movie. So that's how I got involved in making films, was through that comic. And because Comic Express gave me those free comics, and I handed them out to the right guy. And I got to tell that guy, I wrote him a few years later, told him, like, hey, I got to make a movie because of this, and it's because you did this for me. And I just wanted to thank you for that. And, it sucks that they went out of business. But they just were overwhelmed. And then I ended up moving. I finished the 3rd book in the Malevolent series, and it was a 250-page. I put it all together. That was a graphic novel, and I think Comic Express was still around, so they're the ones that did that one. So yeah, that was 2008, and that's when we made the movie Girl Number 3. And so from that point on, I kind of just stopped doing comics, because I also started working for Horror Hound that year as an illustrator, and I was making films. My daughter was born that year, so comics were just so much work. I was doing guest things for a comic company in Pennsylvania called PLB Comics, and they had some comics that I did shorts, like 8-page or 4-page short. I would write and draw for them. But as far as that, I do have a comic book company called Rebel Rouser Comics, and I started that in 2010. Because a few guys that I knew from the film world that I was working with had always dreamed about making comics. And I said, guys, you can do it. It's affordable. I can show you how to do it. So I created Rebel Rouser Comics to help them, to start them into comic books. And so I said, well, I'm going to have a play. I'm going to do a little anthology, Rebel Rouser Comics Presents. And I wanted to have fun this time. I didn't want to do a dark comic. So I did this kind of weird fantasy comedy horror action. Like, it was just this weird comic book where it was about the main characters were a 40s detective and a 50s greaser chasing an old west gunslinger. And it's like, there's no rules. There's zombies, there's robots, there's all kinds of shit in there.
Yeah, the covers are on the website. They look interesting.
It was called A Bloody Pulp. And like the first issue is like the guy, there's like a bookie who's like wanting money from the greaser, and he's like this midget, I should say, a little person in this little floating, like kind of like what Grogu floats in. It's something like that. And like his muscle, his bodyguard was this big, goofy looking robot that was painted up, and he thought he was John Wayne. He was programmed to be John Wayne, like he came from Westworld, and he was a John Wayne robot, but he didn't look anything like John Wayne. He was like a really shitty robot that was painted to look like John Wayne. And it was silly shit like that. And so I had fun with that, and I published, I think, 3 books, and gave a guy named Brian Rodman his start. Brian has a comic book. I think he watches Horror Syndicate sometimes. But Brian was this young kid who I met at a comic shop, and he wanted to do comics, so I taught him. And at that point, Comic Express had gone out, so I was using Comics Wellspring, I think, is what I moved over to.
That's what I use, actually.
And after I did that, that was it until I got hired to do the Leslie Vernon sequel comic books. That was kind of my last hurrah as comic book artist. Because I'm too old for it. It's too much work. Comic book illustration. I was making the Star Wars movie, and I was making the Star Wars movie when I got the Leslie Vernon comic gig, and I tried to talk my way out of it. I said, "Dude, you don't want to do this. You're not going to make any money. There's no money in comics." And he's like, "You sound like my producer, Nate. Let me worry about the money." And so I had to produce this comic book and make this movie at the same time, and it was fucking hell. Because I also work at UPS, I have a family, and I had an art career going. I was, still doing art for Fright Rags and Screen Factory and all these different companies. So it was a rough 2 years. And then the comic came out, and everybody's like, "Oh, we wanted the movie."
Yeah, it's just like apparently the Zack Snyder Justice League cut. They're talking about doing a comic for the sequel, and nobody wants that. They want the movie. I get it. I mean, I want another Leslie Vernon movie too.
I wanted it too.
I'd like to read the comic.
But unfortunately, I mean, the thing is, I don't think you're going to get the movie just because of the money involved. And then
not at this point. I don't.
Scott Wilson's character was very intricate too. Well, from what I heard last, I think when Nathan was on our show, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That they're like that. That
you mean the comic I got
did. They might do something else, but the comic is the sequel. But they may do something else, but it won't be that story. It won't be that because again, Scott Wilson's gone, unfortunately, and Eugene's character was very critical to it, and Robert Englund. I'm sure Robert Englund had a much bigger part in it. He may be too expensive for him. I don't know, to be in it that much because I imagine on the first movie they had him for a couple of days, but they would need him a whole lot more for the sequel, the comic that I did. That was based on the script that they had written. But I mean, I miss comics. That's why I cut my teeth on. My style is still kind of based in comic books. I learned to draw because of comic book artists. That's who I learned from, Jim Lee and Sam Keith.
You did this to me. You do this. This is my character. If anybody doesn't know Eclipse, that Nate, he did this for my birthday, and then he sent me the actual original. I'm like, why'd you do this to me? I want more.
Well, it's like when I thought about that, I kept seeing you promoted it, and I went, when I was in high school, that was something I enjoyed doing. Was I had a lot of friends who created comic books, and it's kind of cool. A while back, I got to hook up with them right before COVID. We all met at the local mall. All these guys I went to high school with. My buddy Jason Slater, who I'd known since middle school, and
you had a friend named Slater, like Dazed and Confused. Slater,
yeah, Jason Slater. And Jason was like, if you've seen that picture of me dressed as Freddy and he's dressed as Jason going to a Halloween party in 1988 with that tape, with Nightmare 3 and 2 on it. But I've known Jason since then. We met in 6th grade, and I was drawing a dragon. He was a big Dungeons and Dragons guy. But we started drawing comics through high school and middle school, and he's been one of my biggest supporters. We still see each other and talk to each other every once in a while. Daryl Tucker, who's a really good guy, who's a good friend of mine. He's doing a lot of painting now online. He did a lot of Black Lives Matter paintings inspired. He's African American, so he was doing a lot of paintings in his front yard in the neighborhood. People would come and watch him paint in the yard.
That's cool.
And he would paint like Breonna Taylor. We're from Louisville, so we were
right.
He lives in Louisville. So, and then we had Damon. The other 2 guys I wasn't entirely as close to, but there's Damon Elliott and Brian and Pry, who I did some comic books my senior year in high school with, and I hadn't seen Damon since high school, but Brandon works at UPS. I'd seen Brandon, but my other two buddies, Chris and Carl, they couldn't make it, unfortunately. But we used to draw comics all the time, and like high school, like get out of school, go over. If I wasn't working, I'd go over their apartment, and we'd be watching like Batman the Animated Series because that's when it was on, 92, 93. Batman Animated Series, Animaniacs,
Yeah.
and drawing comic books. Like that was after school activity, or playing basketball. I was real obsessed with basketball. So if we weren't drawing comics.
Zero comic friends when I was in high school. Zero.
Oh, that's unfortunate because that's all we did. Like if there was a pep rally, we were in the fucking cafeteria drawing comics. We weren't at the pep rally. We were.
Dude, yeah, that sounds amazing. I was alone in all this when I was in high school, alone, and I got made fun of for even reading. I took a comic to study hall, and then I got fucking blasted on. It was awful.
Yeah, we were probably made fun of. We didn't give a shit because there's about 4 or 5.
There was more of you. There was just me. I'm like,
yeah, I bet. Y'all want to know about Captain America?
Well, the best part is now they're asking me questions about it. Yeah. You read comics? Like, go fuck yourself. You figure it out yourself. It's funny in high school.
You paid me for my knowledge.
Right.
I paid it for tears.
Yeah, I did. I had to hide all that stuff, all my comics and stuff, Somebody saw me walking so I had to walk to the comic book shop, which was kind of a walk for me. And somebody saw me walking with some comics in a hand, no bag, and they fucking yelled at me out the window. And then they saw me at school the next day, and were still making fun of me about it. I was like, "Come on, man!" And now they're asking me questions about it. Look, I win. I'm sorry, we win.
Yeah, the geeks have won. They inherited the earth because it's like it's true. Like it's amazing. Like people bitch about everything sucks today. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me, dude? You got the Mandalorian on TV. You've got all these other shows coming. You got the MCU universe. Like even like not everyone is amazing, but 90% of those movies are amazing. Like that they even exist.
That's why it pisses me off when people bitch about the DC universe. It's like, well, first of all, Batman was great, and Batman Returns is great, and the Superman movies are great and everything. But we had to wait so long between anything when it comes to that stuff. I mean, we got Star Wars 77 through 83, and then it was gone for 16 years. It's like now it's like everything's getting pushed out, and now they can make up their mind whether or not they like it. Back then, I think we were forced. And by the way, I love Batman Forever. I just want to throw that out there. Not very many people like that movie, apparently. I loved it.
Yeah, I don't know. I was kind of like, I didn't think Val Kilmer was the right guy, but
you know what though? You know what's funny about that? Bob Kane, the man who created Batman, said that was his favorite Batman ever.
Yeah.
So,
well, I thought Clooney would have been a great Bruce Wayne Batman outside of that movie. Like the one when I heard he was cast, I go, he's a perfect Bruce Wayne because he's like this, like very dark and tall and handsome guy. Like there's something about his, like he to me looks like what Bruce Wayne might look like.
Bruce Wayne, charisma. He would ooze charisma. Yeah, absolutely. And he didn't look bad with a cowl on either.
Yeah, it's just a bad movie.
Bad movie. Yeah, I mean, too many ice puns in that one.
Yeah.
I again, I don't mind it. It might be the worst. Well, I don't know. Superman: The Quest for Peace is pretty rough. Me and Seth just talked about that. But it's pretty rough. I don't know which one's worse. It's apples and oranges, maybe. I don't know. But
we'll give Batman and Robin up because we got that amazing Smashing Pumpkin song. I always say, like
two versions of it too.
Yeah, the darker version, the slower version.
Yeah,
it's just a kind of when I heard it in the Watchmen trailer. I'm
my God,
this is so awesome.
It was perfection. It was awesome. Yeah, it made me really geeked up to see the Watchmen, and like this song was on the Batman and Robin soundtrack. About the soundtrack, of course, because the Batman Forever soundtrack was good in my opinion. So
yeah, it's like the Escape from LA soundtrack.
Yeah, the song, and there was another song that they put on that on another trailer. Oh, it was Muse song.
Yeah, they used the
Mr. Daytona.
Take a bow.
Take a
geek is everything. I remember. Yeah, I'll be honest. Like in high school, even though I was insecure, my hard time with bullying, and I was middle school when I was kind of alone. But like in high school, I don't remember it. I knew that I think I was just like I didn't I wasn't a, I don't know. I just feel like I wasn't paying attention to. I think just because I was happy making comics and I was happy um, liking the shit I liked, and
Yeah.
I don't remember it being a thing because I think because I was an artist, and I think because I was an artist, there were a few popular guys, football players and popular guys who took art class with me, and I was kind of the school artist. Everybody knew me as the school artist, so and those guys liked art, and so I was friends with them, and so and they kind of admired me because of the artwork, because they were artists, and that I don't want to say they admired me, but that I don't know, that's speaking for them. But the thing is, they didn't treat me like they would treat some other geek, because they themselves were art enthusiasts in some ways. Some of the most popular guy in high school was an artist and became a tattoo artist. So it was like
Oh wow.
we were friends. He was like when he started, he was a skateboarder, and then he was into art and all that. So maybe because I didn't have a bully really in high school, I still felt insecure and antisocial, but I didn't have any enemies. Like I didn't have someone I was afraid of.
Yeah.
But
I didn't either really,
yeah,
but
because middle school is where it was for me.
I hid myself. See, this is my biggest problem in life is not being able to focus on one thing. Because I've been talked about making it, but like in high school and junior high, because I knew nobody, I got made fun of for, and it wasn't that bad, the making fun of it sucked, but like, so I played sports, and then of course I became known as the guy who has all the horror movies. I mean, we've talked about that. Let's go to Ray's house. He's got the Friday the 13th movies. So like that stuff helped me because that stuff was still kind of cool, but the comics were not cool up until like 2005 or so, maybe. I don't know. For me anyway.
Oh,
it's like when they were making Spider-Man and Batman and all that's what Spider-Man was too, but still.
Probably when Nolan's Batman movies came out and the Joker, I think that was kind of like that, because I think
probably
I know you don't love The Dark Knight, but I think Heath Ledger in that movie was so fucking good that I think people who don't even like comic books saw that and go, holy shit. So
well, that's the thing. I think the Dark Knight series in general is a crossover series because it's not necessarily your typical superhero movie. It's like a mystery thriller almost. It's not your typical superhero movie like Iron Man or Spider-Man. And I think that's why it brought a lot more people over. And I appreciate the Dark Knight for what it is. It's just not my favorite Batman movie. And part of the problem is Heath Ledger, and it's not because he's bad. It's because he was amazing and stole the show.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like
he
wait
was the
for
best
him,
hands down.
Yeah, like that's the problem I have. Like people say that's the best or whatever, and my thing with that movie is, like you said, he overshadows everyone so much that I don't give a shit about anything else in that movie. A lot of the time, I'm waiting to get back to Heath Ledger.
See the Joker again.
Yeah, and it feels like it goes on and on and on. Maybe it feels so because it's so long. Maybe it feels long because I'm waiting for the Joker because he's yeah.
I'm not wild about Christian Bale either, but like the Heath Ledger and Ledger did so much for that movie for me. Like it got me so amped up. And when he died, I cried about it. I was like, great, the Joker's dead, and I know he's going to be an amazing Joker because I saw it in the trailers only. You can see a sample size of what he's going to be, and I knew he was going to be an amazing. He was the best Joker ever. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix's Joker was different, but very good. But it's still not as good.
But
Heath Ledger
completely disappeared into that part where, like, if you didn't know it was Heath Ledger, you wouldn't know it's Heath Ledger.
Do you remember the backlash they were facing when they cast him as the Joker?
Oh yeah, like that guy from Brokeback Mountain. Yeah, it was
exactly. And that's what everybody said. I'm like, hey, Michael, the best Batman, and he was Mr. Mom. Give him a chance,
Oh man, I remember when he was cast as Batman, like Michael Keaton, Beetlejuice, really, and but that's the thing, like people still fucking make that mistake of questioning casting, where When Anne Hathaway was cast as Catwoman, everybody's like,
Well, I was
she was good.
I was happy
when,
about that. I was like, oh, good.
I saw
She's
a
lovely.
lot of people like, oh, fuck that. No, her. And then, of course, with Ben Affleck, people like were immediately like, oh, no way. And like now, a whole lot of people think he's their favorite. And so, and then, Robert Pattinson, Twilight. He may end up being fucking amazing because he's an amazing actor. So, I don't know. It's just it's like it's a repetitive thing where, oh, they can't do it. They can't do it. They can't do it. Or, even like Gal Gadot is a great Wonder Woman.
Because,
and people are like, well, she's not built like, Amazon. And we're breaking up.
She is. She's really. Well, the thing. Let me go back to Batman for a second. Whenever they cast Ben Affleck, I was very happy about that because he looks exactly like Batman, in my opinion. If you probably read Hush, I'm assuming he looks exactly like Jim Lee's version of Batman. That's what I want. Okay, and then Pattinson, I was like, I had a feeling this was going to happen. I know he's a good actor, but I don't know. And then I saw somebody put a cowl on. I'm like, oh my fucking god, he looks just like Batman. Under the cowl, his chin and everything, he looks awesome. And the trailer. That trailer, I still watch it probably once a week because it's so badass. And that's not even all the movie. It's not even scenes from all the movie. So that people stop jumping the gun and stop looking at fan casting bull stuff. Because that's a big problem, I think, also is fan casting, That's why I don't like doing fan casting. We're going to do it for the Horror Syndicate. We're going to do it.
Yeah, it's just so funny. It's what's so funny about it is when somebody suggests somebody and then some artist, like within 24 hours, does some Photoshop job or like, here's what he would look like as Wolverine, and everybody's like, oh, that would totally work. I'm like, well, yeah, but it's not about. To me, it's like fuck the look. Because I remember like when they were casting like The Walking Dead and everybody wanted Tom Savini to play the governor, he looks just like him. Why? Because he's got a goatee.
He did, yeah.
Like I was like, this guy is going to play him is a fucking amazing actor. I'd much rather see this guy play him than Tom Savini because Tom Savini is just okay actor. He's not a great actor, and he's got to go toe to toe with fucking Andrew Lincoln, who's incredible. You need someone who can fucking go toe to toe with Andrew Lincoln.
Yeah,
and they got the right guys. I'll take a great actor over someone who looks exactly like some artist's rendition of a character. Like it's going to be better. Like Heath Ledger didn't look like the fucking Joker, But what he was the very epitome of that character, who he is. Anarchy. Like, just out of control. I don't want to be in a room with this fucker. I don't know what he's going to do.
He was terrifying. He was terrifying. Scarier than Freddy Krueger.
Because you don't know. Like, someone who just doesn't care and will and has no plan. That was... Nolan doesn't always do. I couldn't get into Tenet. I just tried to watch that last week, but
not a big fan of Nolan, but his Batman movies are pretty decent.
Yeah, I mean, with him, it's kind of like I enjoyed some of his stuff. Batman Begins was probably my favorite.
Me too.
I liked Inception, and I liked Dunkirk a lot, but Tenet felt like he was trying to make Inception again.
Really. I'll get around to that eventually. What's the one? The Prestige? That was good.
The Prestige was good, and Memento, that was his, right?
Oh yeah, Memento was one of the early movies though too.
But after a while, like Tenet feels like what Avatar felt like to me, where it was like, this is like James Cameron's every movie he's already made into one is what Avatar to me what felt like. It felt like Aliens and Abyss and
okay, you're saying
all that together. Whereas like Tenet felt like someone trying to be Christopher Nolan. Like I don't know. Interstellar, Interstellar.
Christopher Nolan fan film? Was that what Tenet was?
Yeah. I mean it was like I'm watching like this is good. It's good. It's well made. I was digging talk about Robert Pattinson. I was really digging him in the movie. But I got halfway through the movie and I stopped and I looked. I got an hour and I don't even know what the fuck the point of the movie is. Like it was just, I don't know where this is going and I don't really want to sit here for another hour. because I don't know why we're doing this and what the concept. And maybe they just explained it, but like they were introducing the concept of the thing that goes on, and like the character actually says, "Don't even question why." I'm like, but why? Like, what? I'm just supposed to like? No, I felt like it was.
You're not allowed to ask why.
Yeah, it didn't feel. It felt like a high con. It felt like that time when like M. Night Shyamalan was like so forced into coming with twists that it felt
Mm-hmm.
forced, and it just
Yeah.
wasn't as organic or as good as like Unbreakable or Sixth Sense was. Where you're like, oh, he's doing this again, and it's not
Yeah.
working this time.
Which one did not work for you? Because The Village I thought worked really well.
I liked everything up to The Happening actually myself.
Yeah,
Like
I agree with that.
I liked Signs, I liked The Village,
I thought The Village
and
was brilliant. Honestly,
I
that's just me.
I liked Lady in the Water because I
That was a good.
I thought it was a sweet movie, and I know he wrote it for his children. It was like a bedtime story he was telling his kids, and he made it into a movie. And sometimes, when a filmmaker goes personal like that, it's usually when the audience just says, "Fuck you, we don't like this. This isn't what we want." Because like happened to Kevin Smith when he made Jersey Girl. It wasn't the movie they were used to, but he
Yeah,
had
no,
become a
that's right.
father. He was writing a movie about being a father. It was a personal
Mhm.
movie to him. And so when your audience is like, no, we like dick and fart jokes and 22-year-old slackers. It's like,
Right.
no, here's an adult story about a man who has a child who's having to raise his child. Like, we don't want to watch that. Kids suck. And so, yeah, so that's what people want things to stay the same. And, it's like Metallica. Metallica matured into a different band, and they were like, "No, we like the old stuff."
Evolve or die, though. In a way, like that's Metallica had to do that because they were going to get left behind. I think in the '90s. I mean, just to piggyback off that, if they didn't,
Yeah,
grunge came in, and the '90s was the music was changing everything, and it's to me
thrash
that's
was going to
evolve or die.
last. Yeah,
Yeah.
like thrash was not like the only thrash band that was really. I mean, Megadeth and all them still stayed around, but they were never as big as they were in the '80s.
No, not at all.
Pantera was this new thing. I mean, they really exploded at that time, but they were
Mhm.
different. They were kind of a precursor to where metal was going with the growling and the heavier riffs and the heavier, like what metal is today owes a lot to them and like Slayer, but even different. And so, but like Metallica, I think they hooked up with a really good producer and they started saying, hey, we need longevity. We want to be, and they became the biggest band in the fucking world. And
Yeah,
it really did. And
I
because
think
they made the
Load
Black
was the
Album,
better albums in my opinion, but
they were just overplayed and oversaturated. Like, I don't want to hear the Black Album again, ever, because
I
it's
can't
like,
say that.
I mean, I like the album, but it's like when those songs come on, especially the big one, what was it, Sandman?
Yeah,
It's like it's so played.
yeah.
It's like Hotel California or you know Sweet
You
Home
gotta
Alabama.
admit,
Like it's
though,
on
Wolfman Man
all
is an
the.
awesome song.
It's
You
like
gotta
when
admit
like what? Yeah,
A
like
Wolfman Man, that song fucking goes
oh,
every time.
Man.
I
Oh
turn
yeah,
music up
like
every time a Wolfman Man comes
I
on.
like
So
that. I love that out. Like Wherever I May Roam and Sad but True and Never, Nothing Else Man. Those are fucking great songs. They still are. Uh,
yeah,
do I prefer the first four albums? Yeah, I do, because that was like my first taste, and I do like that rawness. But they 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 were fans of the bands that inspired those albums. Like they went and made that Garage Inc. song. So you're like, they're Thin Lizzy fans and Bob Seger fans, and they were doing all this. So they incorporated that. And like you said, like artists, we need to grow. I don't want to keep making the same fucking movie and the same fucking art and the same
yeah,
thing for 50 years. I want to explore. I get a chance to work with Lou Reed. I'm going to fucking work for Lou Reed. Like that. You may not like it, but or like my favorite thing Metallica ever did actually was the Michael Kamen concert thing they did with S&M, where they had the orchestra playing, because it was amazing to
that was
hear
really
metal and an orchestra playing,
yeah.
and it was beautiful. It's a beautiful album, And so that's actually my favorite Metallica album, just because it was so beautiful together. And but if they hadn't
come out, was
mm,
that mid '90s?
S&M was like, yeah, I think it was like late '90s, maybe. They just
Okay.
did the second one too, but so on the Metallica. But that's the thing. Is like you get trapped in it where if you keep doing the same thing, it's like AC/DC. Like I love AC/DC, but they sound kind of the same all the time to the point where I bought the new album. Like, yeah, it's great, but it sounds like everything they've done.
Yeah.
But the thing is, at the same time, that's kind of their thing. I couldn't see AC/DC expanding the horizons because it's kind of like that's their thing. Like that's their sound and that's how they are. And they've been able to do it for 45, 50 years.
Yeah. No doubt.
And it's more of that, just seeing Angus out there doing this thing and Brian and all that. But with a band like Metallica, they were kids when they made those albums in the beginning. I mean, they were teenagers, I think, when they did Kill 'Em All. We are not who we are when we were 17, 19, 18 years old.
No,
like we
it's not even
changed.
that. It's the decade change. Think about from 80, what was that, 83-ish when the album came out? Think about that to 93, I think 94 when Load came out. I mean, they're 10, that's a decade. I mean, I'm not the same person I was when I was fucking 30.
Yeah, and like you said, they had to change with the time because grunge came along and just made metal look like like all those bands died.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
like hair metal.
As soon as Nirvana
died.
and Pearl Jam came out, immediately.
But Metallica,
it was almost overnight.
Metallica was arguably the biggest rock band in the world in the '90s. So, I mean, who won? I mean, that's the thing. Like, you may not like it. And I think it goes back to, like you talked about, like, we grew up, like, the early Metallica was, like, what comic books were like to us as in the 80s. Like, no one fucking knew it but the guys who listened to Metallica and thrash metal and Anthrax and Slayer and Megadeth and Exodus and all that. And then Metallica took it to, like, Jon Favreau came along and took Metallica, like, and made it mainstream. Like, so now everybody loves Iron Man, and now everybody loves Metallica. Kind of thing. And like, so the nerds who were like, everybody used to laugh at me for having my Master of Puppets back patch on. It's like now everybody loves Enter Sandman, and fuck them.
Yeah, that's the way it goes too, man. Unfortunately. Yeah. Not everything becomes cool eventually, but the stuff we tend to like seems to become cool at some point.
Good stuff is good stuff. It's just more. It's more people aren't aware of it yet, so people have to be shown. Hey, this is awesome. You missed it, and think about it, all those things that people missed: the B movies or the comic books, the music that they didn't get because it wasn't force fed through them by MTV or the what was in theaters or they just didn't see it. So I think I'm happy that I've had that outsider thing where I sought out these things, where I went to comic book shops and I went to find those hard to find movies, and I found horror movies, and I found kung fu movies or whatever the hell it was, or foreign films or John Woo movies, samurai movies. And so, and what's so cool is like, what's so funny about that is like you love Star Wars as much as you love horror, you love Batman, you love, like, you and I, like, that's our thing. Like, we're so alike. It's probably why we get along, because Batman, Star Wars, Freddy, that's my thing. That's my trifecta, I guess. So
guilty.
Yeah. And so, like, I love those things, but the thing is, we love those things, but it's funny when people see someone like a Danny McBride is going to make a Halloween movie. Oh, he can't do that. He's funny. Like, but he's like, Danny McBride's my age. Right. He certainly grew up with Star Wars. And he certainly grew up with Halloween and Freddy and with Bill Murray and with all these things that we all grew up watching. And if you talk to, people who really love this shit, they love it all. I like. There's some people who are like, no, I just listen to metal, and no, I just watch horror movies.
Do you
But
think?
most. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Finish your point. I got a question I want to
Well,
ask. Go
the
ahead.
thing
Finish.
is, like, if you talk to somebody and you're talking to somebody who loves art, loves storytelling, loves music, you could sit there like we just talked about Star Wars and Batman and X-Men and Metallica and Anthrax. We're talking about all these things organically, and we could keep up with each other because you've experienced it too. You've known it, you've loved it. And that's how
Yep.
people who love art and love storytelling and love those things, we do absorb it all, and it's a part of our history. And you can
Oh yeah.
that's why when you meet someone like ourselves, someone like you could talk for 10 hours and not even realize it, because you've both
Absolutely.
experienced and loved the same shit. And it's not just narrow. It's not just, oh, I just like Forrest Gump. It's like, no, I like all these things. Like people say, well, I just like, oh, you're a horror guy. Like it drives me nuts when, like, since I made the Freddy fan film, everybody thinks I'm a Nightmare guy. I'm like, look, I love Nightmare, but I love a lot of shit. I love a whole lot. I don't watch Nightmare every day. I watch Nightmare once a year.
If you love horror, you should write a horror comic.
Yeah, you should write a horror comic.
I do that all the time. It's like, come on.
Yeah. So, like, artists aren't one-dimensional. Creative people aren't one-dimensional. We can do a lot of different things. So we're not just going to do the same thing. We will expand our horizons.
Read that, Nathan.
That would make a great inspiration speaker. Yeah.
Do some live feeds. Pound the desk like Dwight and do your,
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So about Danny McBride, not technically Danny McBride, but how do you think the fan bases of a Star Wars or a Batman or even Superman would feel if Kevin Smith came in and made one of those movies? Do you think they'd embrace it because they know he's a geek like us? They know he grew up with that stuff. I mean, he made a joke about him, and I think it was him and Walt went to college, and they were taking criminology or something like that, and they were like, "Who the fuck do we think we are, Batman? What are we gonna do?" Like, what would you think if Kevin Smith came out and it's like, "I'm making the next Batman movie"? How would you think people would take that? Well, he makes dick and fart jokes. That's
they would. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like you said, he knows.
Alex, you're too kind, man. He's way too kind.
Well, that makes me happy, and I want people to be inspired and go follow their dreams and do all these things. Like if Ray and I could do this, like I said, like earlier, in the late '90s, I had no idea where I was going, how to do anything. How do you get this going? I didn't believe in myself. I was afraid because I felt if I failed at my art, that's all I have, and I will suck. And now I am a professional artist. I have worked with people all over the world. People all over the world have my stuff on their walls. That kind of thing. I don't grasp that all the time, but it that happened. And
think about how many people have the Scream Factory Blu-rays that your art. I mean, that's got to be mind blowing.
It is. Like it still. When I walk into a store and see it, even 15 years after my career has started, it's still like, whoa, that's mine. Like it's still and I always wanted to feel that way, because I would see artists I would talk to them that had gotten there before me, and I would talk to them, and they didn't seem impressed with that anymore. Like it was just, oh yeah, I did that thing and it's coming out. I think, did that come out? I'm like, I don't want to ever be that way. I want to be grateful and excited about every fucking opportunity I have.
Yeah.
And so when Fright Rags calls me up and says, "Hey, you want to do this T-shirt?" I'm like, "Fuck yeah, I do!" Like, awesome. Like, and
I want to see it on somebody's chest.
Yeah, someone's gonna wear that, and I'm gonna say, "Hey, cool shirt," but at the same time, I'm like, I get to work on these things that I adore. Right. I love, like, I just did a George Romero thing, and it's like, oh, I get to do George Romero. Like when I did the Day of the Dead cover, I'm like, I get to do a zombie movie, like a George Romero zombie Blu-ray cover.
Halloween or 3, for Scream Factory. We've done all the Halloween movies. Right?
Everything, almost at least all the world. So, like, when I get to do those things, even when I'm not a big fan,
you got to do Eclipse. Even more important, you got to do Eclipse. So.
I got to do the Eclipse comic book drawing, but the thing is, I go into every job to try to make people see it and go, oh wow.
Yeah.
And that's what I like when I drew your character. I was like, I hope Ray just like totally shits his pants when he sees this, because like
I may have.
it's like, because that's what I would hate to do it.
I was
Somebody like,
honest. No, when I saw that, first of all, if I can take you through, that was my birthday morning. I wake up and the first message I see is from my friend Dexter, and he drew a character of me, and I got a lightsaber and a Freddy glove and all this different stuff. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And then I see that there's a message on the discourse chat, and I open. I'm like, oh, he drew a clip for me. And I looked at the pose. I'm like, he looks so beaten. Oh my god! And then the best part about that, it was inspiring to me because I had already written issue 2. I'm like, I know what I want for issue 3 now, and I want him to end up looking like this by the end of issue.
Yeah. I think I talked about
so
that.
That's why I was like the very cover for issue 3 for sure.
That whole beaten thing. Like I thought about that. Like
I had a paper bag, but I was blowing the paper bag, so I was like trying to catch my breath.
Well, I remember like seeing things like, again, it goes back to Star Wars, the used universe. Like, this ship is not clean; it's battle damaged and it's scarred, and like that was what was cool about it. Where you're like I remember the Dragonlance stuff and Larry Elmore's paintings, and seeing like these barbarians and these knights and these elves and these like whatever fighting, and they've got their armor is dented. Boba Fett's armor is dented and beaten, and I remember like when Todd McFarlane did the Torment book, and Spider-Man's costume just shredded to shit, and like at the he's bloody and his costume's ripped out. I don't remember ever seeing Spider-Man that beaten up and broken, and like that
Superman
last panel
versus Doom.
Yeah, Superman versus Doom. But like that, I remember that panel of the end of Torment where like Spider-Man's in the bathroom and he's bloody and wet from the rain, and he's like he can't stand, and he calls out to Mary Jane, "Honey, I'm home." And it goes back to like Indiana Jones on that boat taking his clothes off, sore and aching, and then Bruce, at the end of Die Hard where John McClane walks out and he's all bloody, his feet are all fucked up. He's like, "Hi, honey," and like the one of my favorite X-Men is like when Wolverine's crucified on that X out there in the desert, and Jubilee sees him, and he rips his hand out from like pulls his hand. He's like on the ground, and he looks over. He's like, "Hey kid, you gonna help me here?" or something like that. It's like seeing those heroes vulnerable and broken and beaten, but still fighting through it. I think it's always been inspiring, and that was one of the things I liked about Stan Lee's run on Spider-Man. I remember reading it was always like he would fight
just more visual.
So like he would fight the villain and like he would lose, and then he'd have to figure out how to come back and beat the Vulture or Electro or Doc or whatever. So I liked that rising from the ashes storytelling of our heroes, where they have to come back from near death to fight through, even when they're facing death, when they know that they might die or they are going to die through this kind of thing. Where I just like that type of storytelling. So when I draw characters, I don't necessarily. I mean, it depends on the character, but when I see a character like that with a bunch of samurai swords and he looks like a vigilante or something, I'm like, well, I like that element. I like the Daredevil show because you see him get whipped, or you see the Punisher get fucked up when he's sitting there in the graveyard all bloody and talking. And like when someone has really gone through a war, and I think that goes back to like one of the problems I had with like the cartoons I grew up with or whatever, is like we'd watch G.I. Joe fight a battle and no one's hurt or no one's dead. No. Although there was that one, I think, where like Snake Eyes was like taken over by radiation or whatever, and like he was
Yeah, that was an early one. That's when he finds Crimper. Yeah.
Yeah. So like just the whole nature of Snake Eyes is that he's someone who can't talk because he was fucked up in Vietnam or in the war or whatever. So those guys who are scarred and they've been through hell and they have a history and they when you would see like Rambo take his shirt off and see the scars on him and things, those were intriguing because there's like who is this guy? What has he been through? I just like that element of.
You ever see that Alex Ross piece of Batman where he's hanging the cowl up and it just shows his back?
Alex Ross, where he's got the scars.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Which you would on Bruce would be totally broken. I mean, that's why I love like Frank Miller, where he gets his like. And Year One is my favorite Batman comic, and I prefer that over Dark Knight because I like seeing when he goes out on his first mission and almost gets his ass like he's like those three kids who are still on the TV on the catwalk or the thing where like the kid throws a TV on his head and one kid he knocks out and he's holding him trying to keep him from dying, falling off the catwalk, and he's like fighting another kid with one arm while he's holding the other one, and he just sits there. Or the one he goes out and fights, and Selena like stabs him, and all these whores and pimps and everything are beating him up, and he goes back to Wayne Manor, and he's like he's going to ring the bell or not. He's going to sit here and die and bleed out. What do I do, Father? And then the bat crashes in. Those kind of moments are like just powerful to me. So when I drew your character, I'm like, I want to give him that moment where you're like you said, it inspired you. Like, how did he get here? Where's the story that led to this moment, and where's he going to go from that moment? It's better than just seeing a guy like badass. Like it's like there's a story in that image. It's like seeing and maybe that comes from like Frank Frazetta. Frank Frazetta was like that guy who Frank was able to capture the right moments and the right energy. When you would see Conan in his paintings, you saw the scars, you saw the intensity when he was. You could get that battle. What happened on your own.
Yeah. I mean, you can make up what happened. Yeah, that's what Frank Frazetta was best for, in my opinion, was telling the story. Yeah, I think
artists are supposed to tell a story in an image. You know, like you're supposed to capture the right moment, and I want to be able to look at that image and say, I know everything, or I can imagine what they've gone through. And like so there's nothing better than seeing a hero who is tattered and beaten and brutal and you know there's a humanity there because he's not immortal. He can die. He can die in this thing. Right. Like, when you see John McClane, like he can die. He could not make it through this. And instead of just like boring gods who are just like bang bang, you can't kill me, but, you know, like there's something boring about that. So I mean, even Superman was kind of boring because of that. But Batman's like, this is a dude. Like he could get killed. Like he could die, and he has to use his will and his training and his mind to overcome huge obstacles. And Batman's villains are just murderous psychopaths. Like, so I think that's why Batman will always work, because DC. I never loved DC because they felt so dated. The characters were gods and aliens and all that. But Batman will always work because Batman's a man. He's a human. He deals with real world criminals. I mean, even though some of the Batman characters are, you know, Killer Croc, shit like that, but we can imagine a Joker. We can imagine a Riddler. We can imagine a Penguin and a Catwoman. And yeah, even Scarecrow, we know that he could, there's people could create a toxin that would make people be afraid of. He's just a dude. Sure. He's not. Yeah. So like those characters kind of think because Bill Finger and Kane kind of created him in that pulp real world crime noir era of storytelling in the 30s and 40s, where that's what worked. He was going from the Phantom and the Spider and the Shadow who those guys existed in that world of the guys of the fedoras and the crooks, and that's who they were fighting, and the masterminds and mad science. Like, I get to the point, like, that's one thing I do. Like, I got tired of some of the Marvel movies, the early Marvel movies. I got tired of the mad scientist thing where you get this lab and you get the guy. Like, why are they all fucking mad scientists? Like, something else happened to him that made him that way.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough variety. Like, I got tired of seeing squeaky clean stainless steel labs in Marvel movies. Or like, so that's the thing. That's the only criticism I have of the MCU movies is the villains rarely matter.
They're not as interesting as
no, like only
Batman.
once in a while you get a Loki and you get a Thanos and you get a a few of the other guys like Vulture. I thought Michael Keaton's Vulture was really interesting because he had a really good motive.
In the comics, in my opinion.
Yeah, but like most
and it's Michael Keaton.
Marvel, yeah. But like his motivation was real. Was I ain't gonna take over the world. Like they took everything from me. Yep. I'm going to get my money. I'm going to do what I have to do to survive. And you kind of get it. It makes sense for today's world where people are struggling, people need money, and the government and all these people are the class system and all that. So the Vulture in that movie was someone we could almost understand and relate to. And that's what I liked about the best villains are that way. So. But a lot of the Marvel movies where you're looking at like, who was the villain in that one again? I don't remember.
Yeah.
And DC's been having the same problem with I like Ares and the Wonder Woman. The Wonder Woman movie is great, but like the villains, like I don't care. Like, and I think the Batman, like I said, the Batman usually the villains almost outshadow Batman because the villains are so fucking great. And the villains need to be great. You need to have strong villains. You need to put as much effort into your villain as you do your hero. And that, to me, that's where Marvel is kind of hit and miss. Thanos was amazing, and Loki was amazing. But a lot of them have been kind of like, oh, it's just a guy who's like the hero. He's got the same guy's suit, and and they're just forgettable. Unless you get a guy who's really fucking good, like like Tim Roth in Incredible Hulk. Tim Roth's amazing, and but it was like the thing that made it great was because Tim Roth is so fucking good in that role.
Yeah,
and he's such a great actor.
I mean, they do a great job casting. Also, it's but you're right. Some villains fall flat.
Like Guardians of the Galaxy is amazing, but the villain, like, who cares? You know. The guy that was the villain in Guardians of the Galaxy was like
Ronan.
Yeah, Ronan. Like I can't remember. Yeah, like it was just a throwaway thing. Like, and that's kind of been my thing with DC is like DC's felt like the movies that they've been making. It's felt like the villains are like an afterthought. Where it's like, oh well, here they show up, and whereas when I grew up with Christopher Reeve. Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor was fucking great. He was great. He was so colorful and he was so magnetic. And he didn't even have to look like Lex Luthor. He was just so fun. And then like Zod, Terrence Stamp was those villains were just wonderful.
Performance in Superman was amazing.
Yeah. That movie,
there's a
Superman
scene where
especially is one of those movies I watched so much, and I just like that was another early influence of just them arriving in town and all the shit they do, and the Superman giving up his powers and going to the bar and getting the diner and getting his ass whipped, and then like great, such great storytelling. Yeah, wonderful. I want to watch Superman 2 now.
Yeah, maybe if Seth doesn't object, you should come on and talk Superman 2 with us when we do that, because we're doing the Superman movies. I just watched Superman Returns last night. I like it still. It's not great, but Brandon Routh I like.
I remember being
Kevin
moved
Spacey
by. Yeah, I remember seeing Superman Returns in theaters, and I remember feeling a swelling in my heart when. Is it where like he stops a plane at the ball game? Is that what it is? When he
that was
shows up.
That that scene holds up.
Yeah, like
CGI is
I
a
remember.
little
Yeah, I remember feeling like, oh wow, Superman's back because I hadn't
bit.
seen Superman. You know, I had, and
Mhm.
Brandon looked and sounded like Christopher Reeve, and
Yeah.
it was like it was a magical moment. I haven't watched the movie I think in years, but I remember that moment, seeing him do that, and like, oh my god, I got my Superman back.
And
You
I
know,
saw the
kind of thing.
picture up. There you go. Brandon Routh.
And that was a, you know,
I
I
thought
had
he looked
forgotten
great. Did you
how.
ever see that with him? This
I haven't seen that. I've seen the pictures of it, but I didn't watch. I haven't watched the
he,
DC
he
shows, and
looked amazing.
it's one of those. It's one of those things I need to get around because I haven't watched Flash or Green Arrow or what show is he on? What was that? Was it a TV show that he did
Yeah,
that?
this was from the Crisis on it. They did a Crisis on Infinite Earths
So was that like a separate
4-part episode. That was all
series?
the show's Arrow. Yeah, it was. Well,
Okay.
no, it was. They like did a 4 episode crossover with Supergirl, Arrow, Flash, and one other one. I guess maybe I can't remember what the other show's called.
Gotham.
Offhand. Legends of Tomorrow,
Okay.
I think.
I remember
Yeah.
starting the Supergirl show and liking. I really liked her. I thought she was really good.
Well, she's awesome. She's the best part of the show. I think that
Yeah.
show is kind of boringish, but there's some good episodes in there. And she is great as Supergirl. Melissa Benoist, I think. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's how you
she was so she had so much charisma and likability. I remember I didn't stay with the show because I just have so much hard time absorbing everything because there's so much.
There's a
I've
lot
got
of
my
it.
films and my art and family and jobs and all that. So like I've got
And a
this
horror
list on my
podcast.
phone. Yeah, horror podcasts. But the thing is, at the same time, like that's kind of how it is. Once you start making, because you'll hear interviews with like filmmakers or actors and things like that, and a lot of them don't see anything because they just don't have the time. Because once you're making the shit, you just don't have time to watch it and take it all in. Like I don't know how people, like, I guess, I mean, I was there one time. I used to watch so many movies and so much stuff. And now, like, people, like, well, I'll make a list. And I'm like, well, where's this movie? I'm like, I haven't seen it yet. I want to, but I just haven't had the chance to. And, like, when there's so many things that can get in the way of it. And then, like, TV is so good now that that's such a commitment because you're watching hours and hours and hours of something.
That's why the streaming option it might be a little better, and like especially when you can binge watch things like Cobra Kai, for instance. I watched that the day it was released, but like I do like the Mandalorian's format better, weekly.
Yeah.
Still, the thing about
you can't
it is they're
dissect it and
short
talk
seasons.
to everybody.
Like Arrow and Flash are still doing 22 to 24 episodes. It's like, I'm sorry, what was that?
Yeah, it's like with the Mandalorian.
You there? Okay.
You hear me? Yeah, like the Mandalorian.
Yeah,
I preferred that. I prefer that because when everyone's watching something, I mean, it sucks because everybody's like, "Oh, spoilers! I haven't watched it yet," but you want to talk about it.
I know.
But like, if we didn't see, just imagine if we saw Bo-Katan, Boba Fett, Ahsoka Tano, it's Luke Skywalker in like one Sunday. We watched it all. Like it wouldn't have had the impact. We've been like, oh my god, now like what do I talk about now? Because I've just watched all of it at once. Like no, it was great to like absorb Bo-Katan. Wow, absorb Boba Fett, absorb Ahsoka Tano.
You got a week with each of those characters.
Yeah. And so when you're like just still buzzing over it for 7 days, and you're like, what are they going to do next? Oh my god, my heart can't take this. I can't take.
It's that old thing. I can't wait till Friday. Mandalorian's on Friday, and I like that, and I think that's where Netflix is going to lose out. I think in the end, I bet because they just drop shit. I mean, like imagine Stranger Things. Did you watch that?
I got tired of that after second season, but I have watched all of them.
Well, the first season alone was pretty awesome, and like imagine like the episode where they find Will's body in the water. And having to wait a whole week to figure out what the hell's going on. They didn't do that. We found out seconds later,
Yeah.
And I think that's I miss waiting for things,
I do too. Like I think that's the problem. Like, because And the thing with Star Wars and Mandalorian, because I know some people complain, I want it all at once. But the thing is, the whole point of Star Wars from the very beginning, its initial creation was about the serial and the nature of the serial of cliffhangers. What's going to happen to our heroes next week? That's the whole. And the thing is, as a writer, you're not writing. You're writing those episodes to have, as a comic book writer, as you're writing each issue, you know, I need to have something that makes people want to come back for the next issue. So I have to structure this comic book as I've introduced my character, I've introduced the plot, and I've put my character into peril. How are they going to get out? I have to end that page 24 has to have that splash page of, oh shit, what's going to happen to Batman?
Yeah.
And like, so I will want to read that next book. But if I know that as soon as I get to that cliffhanger, that thing comes up, starts in 5 seconds.
Why do you think The Walking Dead was so like popular and like everybody gravitated towards that? Because every episode ended in a freaking cliffhanger, and you had to find out what happened. Every single episode was like that. That's why for me the rewatchability of The Walking Dead is gone. I can't even do it because I know what's going to happen. It's anyway, but
that's why I liked it. That's to bring that point. That's why I liked that they strayed from the comic, because I knew, like, people like, oh, that's not how it happened in the comics. Like, great, because I've already fucking experienced that story. Right. Now I don't know who's going to die. I don't know what's going to happen, because these characters, that's not the same Carol, and I love this Carol. That's not the same. This better. Yeah, and like, so I like that. I don't know when it would happen, when like, oh, when that character I knew was going to die in that way, it was kind of like, oh, that's cool, but at the same time, like, yeah, I saw it coming. I mean, it's not that shocking to me. Whereas the rest of the world who didn't read the comics were like, oh my god, they killed Dale. Oh my god, like or they killed whatever. Like, I already knew it was happening.
Sophia was a big shock.
Huh?
Sophia, the little girl. I mean, she lived through the whole entire.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, when Sophia was dead.
Shock. Yeah.
Or so I was excited that they didn't follow the comics, because I at the same time I wanted to see certain things, but at the same time, like, it was more impactful that I didn't know, oh, Jesus is dead. They just killed Jesus, like that kind of thing. And
well, they did a great job they talk about fan service all the time. Fan service for the comic book fans and creating something new for everybody, even the comic book fans. They balanced it really well. I mean, until I stopped watching, I haven't watched it in a couple of years, but through the first 7 or 8 seasons, it's like I loved it, and I love the comics. And it was great seeing two different things, and then every now and again you'd see something that goes back to the comic, and they'd still explore comic storylines as well, just a little bit different of a take.
You just don't want a carbon cut. No artist wants to be tied down to something exact. Like, if I'm just going to make the comic, then just go read the fucking comic. Like, let me do something. Like, especially since Kirkman was, involved in the show.
Yeah.
Like, he just spent 15 years making this comic. He doesn't want to just do that again. Maybe I can explore this. I'm sure he was like excited to have Daryl. Like, oh, I have this new character to play with, or oh, I have this other thing to do, and like, so, oh, maybe I wasn't happy with how I did that in the comic. I wasn't happy with that direction. I can explore another route.
With comics too. There's just so, like, comics that are pretty unlimited for the most part, but you're still in kind of a box with comics, especially since he already created them. It's like George Lucas going back to his movies and saying, I wanted to do this, I could have done this better. And that's why I appreciate the special editions. I have no problem with them at all, really. And Robert Kirkman got the chance to kind of revisit his comics and maybe add more things maybe he was thinking about back then, or he saw room for improvement in certain situations. When I go back and read one of my old scripts, like Operation Eclipse #1, when I went back to rewrite that, because I wrote that like 5 or 6 years ago. So when I went to reread it, I changed so much of the story, because as a reader you evolve, and I'm thinking that's why I look at The Walking Dead. Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, that's how The Walking Dead is to me. I think he evolved as a creator.
I think the only problem with what George did to the Star Wars movies was it wasn't that he became a better filmmaker. He's going back correcting what he didn't do well. He
With
was
technology.
just jerking off with the technology, like, oh, I
Yeah.
could put this in there. It didn't make the movies better or the stories
No.
better or anything like that. What he was adding, he wasn't going back correcting his mistakes. He was going back doing things he couldn't accomplish in 1977, 1980, whatever. So to me, I get it when people were saying he shouldn't do that. I'm like, look, it's his. He's the father of Star Wars. He can do whatever the fuck he wants with it. At the same time, I do believe like still give the fans the option to see what they already fell in love with, the versions that they already
I agree
like.
with that.
Like if I fell in love with
I
a
do agree with
song, like if I love this song, and all of a sudden the band said, "Hey, we re-recorded that song 30 years later, and you can't ever hear this original version that you kissed your first date, your wife to, because I don't like that version, so you can't ever hear that original recording of that song that
Yeah.
so well and meant so much to that you played at your mother's funeral." Like no, you can't have that anymore. So I think that's what it is. Like George, just let the fans have the Star Wars that they saw in 1977 that they fell in love with. Because sometimes when I do see those movies, I'm like, I hate that I don't like that version. I don't like that version. I don't like McClunky
Do
or
you not
whatever the
like
fuck
seeing
it
three
is.
Greedos? Do
Huh?
you not like seeing three Greedos? Is that the problem? You don't like seeing three different Greedos? Because
That
Han Solo shoots Greedo, and then he talks to Jabba the Hutt, and there's two other Rhodians, Greedos, walking around in the same suit and everything. That always bothered me.
well,
But
like
also, we got
the
earlier,
Greedo. I mean,
Boba Fett a little bit.
the shooting Greedo thing is like that defined that character.
Yeah.
That defined Han Solo. That he shot him. Like as a kid, I understood. Oh, he just shot that guy before the guy could kill him. Oh, this is not the type of he did it underhanded. This is a scoundrel. That's his whole
Mhm.
thing. And it was a cowboy thing. It was a western. It defined it so, and it just didn't work. It never worked. They kept trying to refine it, and it just didn't work. And I got George's reasoning,
McClunky.
but like I get that where you go back and go, oh, because sometimes it just doesn't work. Like my Star Wars fan film, like there was, stormtroopers fighting, and then they decide to defect because kind of like Bill Burr's character on Mandalorian, like they realize I'm not who I signed up to be. I've done horrible things and
Yeah.
I regret it, and I've seen my brothers die. I'm going to do the right thing, which is to not murder this little girl, Mara Jade. I'm going to help her escape, and I'm going to get redemption, and I'm going to do this. And then I got to the point where I'm writing like, but then they're like killing their brothers. Like they're to escape, they're having to shoot other stormtroopers. And I thought, Finn had the same problem. In fact, last Force Awakens, where he's like shooting other stormtroopers that were his buddies in some ways. And so it bothered me, like morally, and like this bothers me. And so we drove all the way to Nashville for one of the actors who was in, like, to play the main captain. We drove down there just to shoot an extra scene I wrote because I wanted to clear that up where him and Saxon are talking about Saxon's having a problem with that. I don't want to kill my brothers. And he says, look, we ain't got to kill them. We just got to stop them, which means he's saying just wound them, stop them. But if it comes between me and them, I'm going to go home to my little girls, that kind of thing. Like, so it was to clear up that moral issue that I had and I thought some people might have. And we went down there, we filmed it, I edited it. It's a good scene. But then I put it in the movie, and it's like, doesn't help the movie. It slows the movie down. It fucks the pacing up. I'm going to lose it. Some people might bring it up, but like, I did think about it. So just because it might work better for it, or it's a good thought, doesn't mean it makes the film better. So people say, oh, I saw the director's cut, and why did they cut that scene? Well, it doesn't make it doesn't make it better. It kind of fucks with the pace. Because some people don't agree with pacing, but you talk about take the Nightmare on Elm Street movie. We're both Nightmare on Elm Street fans, and so we're still talking. Yeah, he said, "Oh, we'll be about 30 minutes." Yeah, it's me. You said 30 minutes, like me, 30 minutes. But like the Nightmare on Elm Street scene where Marge is talking to Nancy, and she talks about how they had siblings, and Freddie killed their
Oh
older
yeah,
siblings and all that. And they cut it out, and it explained so much, and it established so much. And it is important, but if you watch the uncut scene before they cut that, it would have went on way too long. And where Wes chose to cut it works a whole lot better because
that's in the basement too, right?
yeah, like the scene
When she revealed love.
yeah, because you get to the point where it's kind of like a comedian when a comedian knows, hey, I hit the punchline, stop there. Like they try to reach for another laugh, and the second laugh doesn't do as well as the big one, so they learn to cut that part. Like, I don't need this because this is enough, and that's how you do as an editing. Like, I don't need this. I know why it's there, and it makes sense, and it's important, and I love it, and all this, but I don't have to have it. It actually hurts the pacing. It hurts the thing because the last thing we need is to sit there with Marge for another minute while she gives us exposition. Like exposition is you want to keep it as small as possible. So while people who don't understand that go, oh, they should have put that in the movie because that's like, but that's why you're not a filmmaker.
There's a lot of weight to that too, if you think about it. Nancy not knowing that she had a sibling, and Marge laying that on her too. I mean, there's a lot to that. That's
a lot to process.
What? Yeah, I mean, think about
it. And you fucking hid her from me for the last 10 years,
right?
And it's a problem. It also creates problems where you're like, well, who the fuck just erases their child? Like that doesn't they know pictures and nothing in your house. You never talk about your firstborn child ever.
Yeah, and then that also raises. So that's why you and Dad are not together anymore.
I mean, it explains so much. So that's why I used it in my fan film because some people say, well, that's not canon because he cut it out. I'm like, no, but Ronnie and John,
canon like Freddie did.
Ronnie and John played their roles with that information being valid in the film. Like, they are playing two people who lost a child to Freddy Krueger. When they filmed it, that was in the movie. That was part of their character.
And she plays her role against his with a lot of spite. Mm-hmm. Like, well, him too, really, when he walks in that first scene, they're together in the police in his office. What was she doing in the middle of the night? And she's like, hello, Donald, or good night, or whatever it was, Marge. It's like, you could tell. Yeah. So there's a lot of freedom. They played it really well.
And I explored that in the sequel script. They have it all out. Like, they're fighting, and he's attacking her for being a drunk, but she's a drunk because she's depressed because she lost her baby, and she's attacking him for not being home, like, because he's, the way I had it's like he's obsessed with catching this guy. This guy's been on the at large for all these years. So Donald, the only way he's been able to process and deal with the loss of his child is to try to find him, because that's the only resolution. And so because of that, he's obsessed with his work, and he's neglecting her and Nancy, who also has lost and needs him. So you've got that thing where a lot of fathers and men feel that they have to fix things and they have to be the one to do all those things. But at the same time, they don't realize, hey, I lost a child too. Hey, I lost my brother and sister too, and I need you here. And so there's so much wealth in that story, in that plot.
There is. Well, it adds more weight to his character in Dream Warriors too. Like, he's broken in Dream Warriors when you meet him in the bar and all that. He's like, he is a shell of a man, and I mean, he's a security guard at this point. Obviously been drinking and lost his wife. She ended up dying, lost his kid. And then Nancy, basically, it's like the question I have though, just thought of it. Did Nancy ever find out about her sibling? Or did why did they drift apart? Do we know why her and her dad drifted apart?
Nancy and her dad. Well, I mean, in Wes's script, John had disappeared and was hunting Freddy. He was like driving across country trying to find him and trying to, because I guess he didn't realize, like, oh, he's a dream demon or something. So, like, the whole plot of Wes Craven's Part 3 was Nancy was out trying. Nancy was trying to find her dad. She was hunting her dad down because his dad was hunting Freddy. And so I don't know.
Didn't Seth say he was going to do a write-up on that script at some point?
I think he did, didn't he?
He did. Seth, if you're watching or if you watch this, come on, man. Hook us up. Anyway, why don't we close up shop for the 2 hours and 14 minutes? I've had a lot of fun. This was a lot of fun. We need to do it again. You're always welcome to talk with me. We'll be talking about An American Werewolf in London. You gonna watch it this weekend?
Yeah, I gotta watch it. I'm gonna try to get Lily to watch it because I don't think she's seen it. So,
hey Seth, right here, buddy. Great script. Come on, do your write up. Yeah. So Nate, thanks for coming on. It was fun. I don't care how long it was. We could sit down and probably talk for hours. Like that's probably better off that we take people with us to the horror convention, so we don't end up sitting there talking for hours and hours on end.
Yeah, it happens. You know, like I used to get like calls from Nathan from Horror Hound. I'd be at work, and he'd call, "Hey, you got a minute?" He would text him, "Hey, you got a minute?" He'd want to like hit me with something that was going on with the magazine or the convention, like, "Oh, I'm trying to get Robert Englund or something." He'd be, "What do you think about bringing this person?" He would try to get my opinion or advice on who he should book or what he should do with this or that. And so he'd call me up and like, "Yeah, I'm at work." And he would call me and I think, "Oh, I only got like 20 minutes or something to talk." But like we ended up talking for hours. Like, "Hold on, I got to go cover a play." And like we just talk because we didn't get to talk a lot, but he's like us. He's a true geek. He loves it all. And we would just get on to it. And, you know, my wife always jokes like, bunch of women on the phone. I'll just talk for 5 or 6 hours. And it's like, it is like, and I think it's because we don't get to talk to everybody about this stuff because not everybody is in love with this stuff as we are. Yeah. And I think that's part of the appeal of doing the show and being on Facebook. Is on Facebook we have sought out and found people like us.
Yep. Yeah. That's the one thing I like about Facebook is I get to kind of congregate with people that are like-minded for the most part, and we get to share our geekery together, and that's why, you know, I love our show with the Horror Syndicate. We get to do the same thing for horror, and that's why I want to do this and try to get my friends that love this stuff involved in coming on. And I wanted to do a bigger show, but I like this more personal setting for this stuff. But yeah, it's I got to tell you, you're talking about like women. My friend Dan, who after he got married, he kind of fell off the face of the earth. But we used to have a weekly phone call on Thursdays to talk about comics, and it was 4 or 5 hour phone calls. And my wife hated it. She hated it. 2 and 4 hour phone calls talking about comics. She'd be happy I have somebody to talk to you about comics instead of talking to you about it.
Yeah, you don't want to hear about like what Thor did this week.
Right. You don't want to hear about the new Green Lantern.
Because my wife doesn't my wife doesn't give a shit about it. She does love horror.
Right.
And we do watch some things together, but she's never been into like comics.
She likes Star Wars.
My nephew's texting me. I guess I need to go. We got to shoot. I got shooting tomorrow. But yeah. Oh.
Well.
I got talk to him about the shoot tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll talk. We'll talk another time. We'll do something. And Tuesday for sure. Check it. Are we going at 7:30 your time or?
Hopefully. Like I'm still doing the whole peak season shit, but I think maybe next week will be all right. But 7:30 will be all right, even if I have to bow out.
It was a big deal for me. The other guys, I don't know. Don't care. No.
It's Seth's favorite movie. We'll give him the
oh yeah, Seth's gonna get riled up for sure. He's gonna get riled up for sure. I can't wait to watch it. I got that Arrow Blu-ray with all those special features, so I'm gonna try to dig in. I'm gonna do something that you did last season, which was take notes. I'm gonna try that for once instead of just trying to remember stuff. Anyway, Nate, thanks again for being on. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and I'll see you. Well, I'll see you on the Discourse chat, and I'll see you on Tuesday. And thanks everybody for watching and hanging out with us and commenting and all that good stuff. We'll do this again soon. All right, and we are